Okay, good morning colleagues, and you're welcome to the Committee for the Economy, and as you are aware, the committee will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. We have no apologies at this stage.
Should just go straight to the Minister.
Yeah, well, we'll get there very quickly. Declarations of interest, item 2. Anyone, any declarations of interest?
Student loan?
Yeah.
Substantial student loan.
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
I am now into my... I have 2 more payments left in my student loan, so I'll still declare my interest.
I feel old then because mine has been paid off a long time.
It's all money you're earning. It's all money you're earning. Okay, chairperson's business. Quickly, members, just at item 3.1. At question time, the Minister referred to his ongoing important work in relation to credit union reform, and I know it's an issue that members have had a particular interest. So, the committee happy that we seek some further update on that? Thank you. Okay, we'll now move then directly to our evidence session with Minister Murphy, Ian Snowden. My eyesight is terrible, Joanna, you're welcome back. And Sharon, thank you all very much indeed. Minister, we are delighted to have you here. I know it's a busy schedule for you. Been a while since we've had you here, but we've had your officials here on a number of occasions, and they have, despite my best efforts, represented you and the department very well. So they're doing important work on that regard. Minister, you've been a chairperson before, so we're keen to try and get as many members in as possible, but thank you for being so generous with your time, and at this stage I'll hand over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you to the committee for having us this morning in front. I know probably the primary focus is around the finances and the budget, but I'm sure we'll be able to have a discussion on any aspect of the department's work that the committee or our committee members are interested in. As you say, I have with me Ian Snowden, who's the Permanent Secretary. Be very familiar to Sharon Hetherington and Joanna Parks, who deal with finance. So any of the difficult questions about money, they will be answered. Just generally, by way of opening, we have made significant progress across a range of areas over the last 10 months, which I'm very pleased about. We have significant momentum in some of the things that we're trying to do. The big challenge, as you will know, and I'm sure some committee members will know, in order to do the things that we want to do over the next couple of years, is finance and getting sufficient budgets to do that. And the budgetary system remains very, very challenged. Despite the best efforts of the Finance Minister and First and Deputy First to press on London the need to actually bring us back to a level of funding which can support public services. But our objective is to obviously argue for as much support in terms of finances as we can get, and to use that as wisely as we possibly can. And in that regard, of course, the work of the committee is very important in scrutinising that and offering observations and challenges in relation to that. A number of plans that we have been working through, obviously the committee will be familiar with, having officials in to speak them. Sub-regional economic plan has been launched. Local economic partnerships are being developed at pace with the intention of having those in place in the new financial year. City deals have been signed and they're proceeding. We have one of the first objectives we had was trying to resolve the further education lecturers pay award situation and to move lecturers onto that trajectory where teaching staff find themselves. The Good Jobs Bill consultation is complete, and that proposals are being developed to be brought to the Executive, and of course the committee will remain engaged in relation to that. SME Productivity Booster was launched. Access to tuition fee loans for medical students has been progressed with the Department of Health support. The ban on onshore oil and gas exploration was recently approved by the Executive. Cross-departmental work that we've involved in involves community wealth building with Department for Communities, careers, special educational needs post-16 with Department of Education and Department of Health and Communities, and of course carbon reduction targets with DAERA. We've been working closely with them. We have consultations out on smart meters and support for low carbon heating. We have progress work in relation to support for City of Derry Airport. Co-design and agreed action plans for social enterprise for 7 high potential sectors in the economy and digital skills. McGee Task Force the report is due to be published next week. Tourism Action Plan will come in the new year. I had hoped to have it this year, but it will be now into the new year. We have a range of funding announcements and you'll be familiar with them, so I don't propose to go through them because I think there's better opportunity to have dialogue with committee members, but there have been a range of funding announcements over the course of the last 10 months. In terms of broader activity, all island and international, with the Canadian Advisory Council, US Net Zero Advisory Council have both been launched. Dual market access promotion in Germany, which will continue across Europe in the new year, I think, with visits planned to Brussels and to Amsterdam, or certainly the Netherlands. I think it could be Rotterdam, but engagements there
or anywhere
ongoing. What is it?
Or anywhere. Given members were quoting
Liverpool
song lyrics yesterday.
I was lost on a lot of people. Cultural reference. So we've had, as you would be aware, also very successful trade missions in Singapore, New York, Chicago, Washington, Toronto. The new Invest NI hub has opened in Dublin, and the strategic tourism group with both departments, North and South, and the 3 agencies across the island has been up and working. Obviously, we will intend to pick up when the new administration comes in Dublin, that work that we've been progressing around the economy, around business and trade, which is the formal North-South sector arrangement, and tourism as well, another formal arrangement, but in areas of cooperation, significant work ongoing with further and higher education, with the Department of the South, and of course with green energy, where we have shared ambitions in terms of renewables and self-sustaining energy supply for the island as a whole, and obviously continued work in terms of interconnection in the single electricity market. So that's work that we will pick up, obviously, if and when, and hopefully soon, there will be an administration put together in Dublin, and the North-South arrangements will pick up again into the future. So I think, Sharon, there was some in terms of the projections in terms of the budgetary outcome. There was an error in one of them, so Sharon wants to correct that, and we will resubmit that paper to you, but just wants to correct it before we get started, just in case people are working off a wrong script in that regard.
Yeah, so it relates to the information that was provided to the committee on the equality impact assessments, and we just discovered this last night, so apologies, sort of not contacting you in advance. And for those equality impact assessments, there was baseline, there was 3%, there was 6%, they're fine. It's the 9% and the 12%. There was an admin error in terms of copying some information from the 6% into the 9 and 12. So really, if you're looking at that, the impact for 9 and 12 would not be as significant as the papers that you have, but we'll correct that and provide those 2 sets to you. I don't think it'll prevent any questions here today. I think you've probably gathered the essence of the purpose of that is really sort of going from no increase through to where you might get 12, which I don't think's realistic. It's a kind of journey, and it gets better the more money you get, clearly. So hopefully that's okay.
Yeah, of course it is. No problem at all. Minister, thank you for that. Just then, in relation to the budget setting process, where is the executive at in terms of
What, sorry?
The budget setting process?
Oh yes, budget setting. Well, we have been in dialogue, obviously, with the Department of Finance, as all of the individual departments do. I know this experience from the other side over the last couple of years. So we have obviously been presenting our case. I think that, if you go back, in terms of the bulk of our money is spent on further higher education and skills. And if we're talking about trying to grow the economy, which is an executive priority, the biggest challenge that we face is having more people with more skills and more education. That's the biggest challenge we have across from every sector, every level of every sector. Everybody has the same request in terms of that. So I think we make a very strong argument to the executive as a whole that growing the economy is an executive priority. This is a key part of growing the economy, and we will argue for support for that. We come from a low position in that regard over the last number of years, because previously we had European funding which provided for quite a lot of that. That went post-Brexit. It wasn't replaced in full. We were able to, when I was in Finance Minister, we were able to supplement that with COVID money to try and make sure that skills and the Department of Economy continue to get the support that it needed in that regard, but that then stopped. We then obviously had the hiatus in terms of no executive, and so you had a Secretary of State providing a budget. That left us about 50 million short in terms of our budget, unlike any other department. So I don't know what the reason for that was, but it left us about 50 million short. There was some British government funding through shared prosperity initiatives like that, which was used to supplement skills and provision in that regard. And again, that is not likely to be repeated. If there is some repeat of that, it will be at a much lower level. So we have a lot to make up in terms of trying to get to the place we're at. So this is the debate and discussion we've been having, obviously, with Finance Department, and this is the debate and discussion we'll have in the Executive when the budget paper is eventually brought for discussion and decision there. My understanding is that there is an intention to have that this side of Christmas. There is an executive schedule for next Thursday. So whether that's possible, because as I say, I know from the other side there's a lot of horse trading goes on in terms of that, and people pressing cases, and it's the case that there's not enough money to go around, and that's very obvious.
Where do you expect to land in those scenarios that were given to the committee, the 0, 3, 6?
Well, I think Sharon's probably correct in her analysis that 12% is unlikely. But we will continue to make the argument. I don't want to concede any ground in a public fashion here. We will continue to make the case for the best case scenario. But we have been making a very strong case. Needless to say, we made a strong argument in October monitoring for more money. We didn't get as much as we would have argued for, and we are continuing to press that case very strongly. So we would hope for a decent outcome in terms of where we are. But as I say, we are starting from a long way back. We have a long way to catch up. We do get that, when you're making that argument in relation to these matters, then of course you get the health issues, you get education issues, and you get all of the other very acute demands that there are from other departments as well. But I think from our perspective, and you would expect me to say this, but an executive priority is, and the executive have lifted the economic policy that we have crafted and put it into the first chapter of the programme for government. It is about growing the economy. It is about recognising all the challenges that we outlaid. So we will make a very strong argument. I think Sharon, as I say, is probably correct. The 12% is probably unrealistic given the money that we have and the projection of money out. We will continue to make an argument to try and get the best outcome.
Just taking us back to the October monitoring round, so business community in real shock and reeled from the decision by the Labour government to increase national insurance employers' contribution to lower the threshold. This week the Finance Minister made a statement in relation to her assessment and ongoing review of rates. Her assessment was that the rating system was not the best and most reactive way to provide business support to those in need at the minute. So could you outline any bids that you made in the October monitoring round that would have allowed you to provide direct business support during this difficult time?
Well, we already do business supports through Invest NI, and that is with a view to a longer term support and sustainability of business and things like green energy transition and other issues to try and reduce the cost of energy for businesses, to support them to invest in the longer term and actually reduce and stabilise their own energy costs. The difficulty this isn't like the COVID experience where we were getting money and we were channeling it out very quickly to business support, just kind of blanket support to businesses for here's a grant, spend it whatever way you want. So October monitoring is halfway through the year. So in order, you would have to devise a scheme, target the scheme where is actually the most needed, do some work to do that, and have it on the ground and spent by the end of the financial year. So the ability to come in very quickly with a scheme which is reacting specifically to the budget pressures that came basically the same month, it was probably unrealistic to be able to do that. So I think what we need to do is continue to try and invest in supporting business. Rates are, of course, when you do meet businesses, is one of the first, because it's the only thing that we have control over. So people will always argue that our rates are too high. When I was, and Ian was in LPS, when we were both in a different department, we reduced actually the business rates by 18% in the first year that I was there, and then they were suspended during the COVID period. So in many ways, the full impact of that wasn't really affected. I know Kiva wants to try and to try and make sure that we try and support businesses and recognise the real challenges that they're facing. So while I would have welcomed increases in base levels of wages, the national insurance contributions then was almost like a double whammy for businesses as well. So I think that the government should have recognised that while they were adding a cost pressure, they should have relieved that in some other way for businesses, and they didn't do that. Our ability to react in October, to have something devised, targeted specifically for the type of businesses that needed it, in the area that they needed it, which might be in terms of wages or other bills, is probably impossible to do that in that period.
Have you anything then, Minister, in your bid for next year's budget, given that the Finance Minister's process that she's doing in relation to rates review will not be in place for the next financial year, so businesses will continue to get their rates level bill in April, that is this year. So have you got any bids in for direct business support?
Well, the question is, I suppose, something maybe the committee might, where exactly is that needed now? We only have had the budget a month ago. So is it needed in the level of wage support? Is it needed in the level of, for instance, we have schemes in terms of energy to try and support business, not just to support them pay their bills, but actually to transition to a greener energy, which gives them more stability and security. And businesses will tell you one of the biggest challenges they have are energy costs, the fluctuations, unexpected rises in energy costs. So we are targeting support in that area, and we will continue to argue for support in that. But I'm not sure that we can devise a scheme or realistically put together a scheme to support wages in businesses. What level do you do? What intervention do you do in terms of that? As I say, COVID was a different experience in that you could basically say to business, here's £10,000, here's £50,000. Spend it to keep yourself open and keep yourself afloat, whatever way you choose. But we're now in a space where it would have to be much more targeted support in terms of interventions. I think in terms of what Invest A&I do in supporting businesses, helping them, advise them how to grow, what Intertrade Ireland do in trying to get people into a better space is actually, in the longer term, a more sustainable approach, because you're actually building businesses themselves, building their own resilience in that regard, recognising that next year our budgets are as challenging as this year, and if we get into a 3-year cycle, hopefully with a better outcome, it's still not going to be all that we want to do in terms of providing support.
And then just finally in this session from me, Minister, you talk about a double whammy, which that rightly is in terms of the impact of businesses on the national insurance rise. Last week we had representation from the business community, and they're obviously hugely concerned about the impact that the Labour government's decisions have made. But Minister, they're also very concerned about some of the proposals that you have, in particular the Good Jobs Bill, and the representations that we received as a committee last week was that businesses are concerned about the costs that that'll pass on to them. How do you alleviate their concerns that they have a decision by the UK government to increase their costs, and their fear is that our devolved minister is about to try and introduce legislation to increase their costs as well?
Well, there's been a significant degree of consultation with them even before we launched the consultation document. So there was a working group in the department I've met a number of times, involved business organisations, trade unions. It was an opportunity for dialogue to say, well, this is what we actually mean when we're talking about representation for the workforce in a business. This is what. So there was a kind of way of demystifying some of the debate around of all of that and getting a clearer understanding from unions, employee perspective as opposed to a business employer perspective, and that was a very useful dialogue, and quite a lot of the issues that might have caused angst in terms of what we needed to do were addressed in that. And of course we will continue to consult, so we're out for formal consultation over the course of the autumn, assessing the outcome of that. There's been continued dialogue in relation to that, and there will be continued dialogue, and obviously they have opportunity to talk to yourselves, who will have the scrutiny role in relation to legislation that comes forward. So that process, while the formal consultation was over the course of the autumn, it predated that and will postdate in terms of dialogue with them. Big challenge for a lot of businesses is retention. They want to retain employees. So and also we have a challenge in that about, I think, 67% of the jobs that we have are considered to be good jobs in that territory. So it's not a huge number of people who are in situations where they're not getting paid properly, getting guaranteed hours, getting the level of support, that there's a level of perceived or considered exploitation in terms of that. So it's not the entirety of businesses. Matter of fact, most businesses are providing decent employment, steady hours, union representation, decent wages, all of the contributory factors that contribute to a good job. It's not just the wage, and so we're in a decent place in that that regard, but there are people who are in situations not, and we have a responsibility because it hasn't been significant employment legislation here for, I think, more than 2 decades. So we are in responsibility to try and bring people up to that standard to do that. We also have a responsibility to continue to engage with business and business organisations to support them in meeting any challenges that might present them, and so that's the dialogue that we've been in with them. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Minister, and thank you for the presentation and the papers. It's suggested in the budget that if it remains the same in 2025, if you stay the same at baseline, there would be a loss of 600 higher education places, and possibly there's a kind of hint in there about the expansion of Magee would not occur. Can you clarify what scenarios the Magee expansion will proceed, i.e. will it proceed if there's a 3% increase on the budget baseline, 9% or 12%? And I also note in the capital bids programme of ranking, Magee is number 23 in the expansion. Magee expansion. Can you also just give me, why is it so far down when it is such a priority area for expansion? And I realise too that the action plan has been announced on Monday, and I spoke to Stephen yesterday. And have you factored in the needs and the action plan into the financial planning going forward? So just to give us some certainty around that, and are based on the baseline and the percentages increase that you need to make that happen.
As I said in the outset, that the financial challenges in the department are very substantial, and we're coming from a place where other departments were kind of kept at their baselines. We end up losing, and when the government or the budget that the Secretary of State did, we end up losing. We're not a big spending department. We're one of the lower spending departments. So 50 million is a big amount in health. 50 million, in the overall scheme of things, isn't huge, but for us, 50 million is hugely challenging. So we are in a difficult position, but the Magee expansion and the situation there is a programme for government priority. And I mean, I don't argue it in the case of the general run of support that the department gets. I argue it in the case of that this is a NDNA commitment, agreed programme for government priority. We have the responsibility for leading in relation to that, but it's not our scheme in its entirety. The other departments have, and that's why the task force correctly have invited in infrastructure, they've talked to health, they've invited, recognising that there are a range of departments, communities, there are a range of departments have an interest in relation to that. So we intend to make sure that it is the prioritisation that has been given to it by the entire executive is met through the funding that's available for it. The capital, I mean, like most schemes, I guess, the capital spend in the early years is not at the highest level. It's when you get all of the prep work done and all of the groundwork done that you end up getting into significant capital spend. So, for instance, we give Magee more capital this year than it was able to spend, and we have some capital returned which we're having to reallocate. So it is our intention to ensure that whatever the capital requirements that are outlined by the task force next year are met. Because that is an executive priority, and therefore we intend to meet those. So the order it appears on the list doesn't reflect the prioritisation of myself. It doesn't reflect the fact that this project is one which isn't the run-of-the-mill department project. This is an executive priority, and it needs to be met in that regard.
If I could just come in there in terms of the priority on the list, it actually is our top priority for things that are not pre-committed or inescapable. So how you have to go about your capital bids, if you're already in the middle of a build, that has to continue, and there's inescapable and pre-committed, and that's kind of what comes first. And then I think, if I'm right, Magee might be the first priority beneath that. So that's your next category for new things is really high priority, and we have Magee there.
I suppose that's the capital piece, but it's the baseline in relation to higher education places. There's concern. If you don't get an increase in budget, then you have to look at higher education places and make cuts. Yeah. And the suggestion is 600. For next year, if you still remain at base. And I'm really concerned, because it is not just the capital spend for Magee, it's the number base that we're really concerned about.
Well, just to say that firstly, we have outlined the scenarios from the worst case to the best case. So it's clearly not our intention to end up in the worst case scenario in terms of our discussions with the Department of Finance and with the Executive generally. But also in a situation even last year where we were actually able to increase the numbers for Magee, we're not increase them for other universities as well, in line with the commitment to grow the student population there. So again, we don't consider it in the run of the mill with other with the general approach in terms of student numbers. So we will continue to support. We will continue. We established the task force. We have responded to the initial report. We're ready to receive the full report from them, and we will continue to engage them and respond to that. In Magee, it is about growing those numbers in an incremental basis, because the infrastructure needs to be there to support any additional provision as well. So it's a matter of pursuing all of these things and progressing them at the same level. So we will be providing the support that's needed.
That's brilliant.
Sharon, sorry, did you want to?
I just was going to add that in terms of the student numbers more generally, I mean, we do have a gap in our budget, and it goes back to what the Minister said about the Secretary of State's budget that took £50 million out, and then, you know, there was 2 years of his budget and that wasn't put in again for the second year. So as a result of that, we do have a historic issue with HE. I think it's about 7 million. Yeah, and we have been managing this on a year by year basis, you know, but it is something that we're having to manage as a department.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you, Sharon. Also, can I ask, in relation to the target for 65% investment taking place outside the BMA, I really appreciate it and I welcome the sub-regional target, such as it is, but I have been making a case for quite a long time in relation to a specific target for the Derry City region. I believe that we need to recognise that it is the second city and there should be a specific target for regional growth for the second city. Have you given that consideration?
We did, of course, give all of us consideration when we were setting targets, and we had a discussion with Invest NI about what was achievable and what we could do. And we have been putting a focus on the Northwest anyway, ahead of this target being set. But I think we have to recognise that there are a range of areas outside of the Belfast area that are suffering. I mean, I'm a border constituency representative as well. We might happen to be in a strategically more advantageous place, but I can tell you in terms of investment over the years we haven't received any, or very, very little in terms of, certainly not in terms of foreign direct investment. So that's an experience which is shared beyond, and I understand firstly the argument in relation to the Northwest, the historic legacy argument. I also understand that those people who represent the Northwest will make that argument most vociferously, and we get that, but there is a target to increase that, to do that work, to restructure the entirety of Invest NI. This has not been done before. I mean, regional balance has been a feature of the programme for government for well over a decade, but it has not been grasped, and no strategy or plan put around it. We now have a strategy and a plan. We now have Invest NI reorientating its approach. We have the department reorientating their approach in relation to this, and we have a target of what to achieve outside of the Belfast area. So I think that is a much more advantageous place than we have been, and we will continue to work. And I mean, the previous conversation, when I'm in the Northwest, people have identified Magee expansion as the catalyst for economic growth in the area. So we will continue to push that project, and we will continue to work with the government in Dublin, who have a very strong interest in the Northwest generally, in terms of Derry, Donegal, and to ensure that we can attract levels of support there with the incoming administration.
Can I ask, regarding the local economic partnerships, I mean, it's a very modest budget as well, put forward, and you've said in your paper as well that, you know, the funding is not the answer to everything. There has to be, and it won't close all the disparities in isolation. And you've also said it also offers the department the opportunity to work with other public sector funders to align resources to deliver greater support. How can that be managed with every department? Like, do you think the local economic partnership is the vehicle to do that in terms of buying in, you know, from the Department of Infrastructure and Department for Communities and the Department of Health? Will that be able to be the vehicle for delivery?
Well, it may not be. We're not suggesting it's a vehicle for delivery. Obviously, departments deliver their own spend, and what I said in this wasn't that this was not able to plug all the gaps. This is not the totality of what even the Department of the Economy would be spending in each area. So we're already having a conversation about McGee and what we're spending there. That's not part of that budget. That's above and beyond that budget. The interventions that invest in and supporting businesses in that area is not part of that budget. That's beyond that budget, and that's just our department alone. What we see as the local economic partnership is having a modest amount of money to try and get its work going, to advocate on behalf of the area, to pull together. Derry already has its one plan, so it's well down the road, but to advocate on behalf of that area, to have the strength to pull in all the departments and say, well, our priority is in, there's a conversation in Derry around house building and around water and sewage infrastructure. That's our priority. We want to engage on that. We have some money to spend. That it's not going to solve that problem. But what it does is allow that partnership to advocate, to engage with other departments, a bit in a kind of a larger version of what the task force is already doing. So the McGee task force has had the Department of Infrastructure in. They've had other departments in to converse with them. They've sent a series of questions to other departments. They've sent questions to the government in Dublin, which they've got responses to as well. So it is about providing that platform for a more focused economic intervention and ensuring that departments respond to that.
I'm just afraid that the conversation about regional growth gets separated from the conversation about regional balance, because they're completely different. They have synergy, but they're different in terms of, an investment in one place is required in order to break down, to bring that regional balance. And so if we were talking about, for example, David, Lagan Valley, an investment there, it might be about the regional growth, but the investment in Derry is about regional balance, and it has to have a greater priority in terms of meeting the needs. And that conversation sometimes gets lost. Regional growth is not regional balance.
Well, the people who are responsible for providing a lot of the engine work for this are Invest NI, and they're the people who have set the target for regional balance, and they're the people who are responsible for regional growth. So they are going to be very, very closely engaged and intertwined with the local economic partnerships. That's part of their job. Their offices are being reorientated and refocused in terms of meeting those objectives. So, of course, we want to see how this develops over time, and if we have a plan for how we want it to work. We want to see regional growth and regional balance being essentially two sides of the same coin, because the growth is the thing that delivers the balance. And Invest NI are in that space, and they arguably weren't in that space up until this year. The department arguably wasn't in that space up until this year. So we want to drive ahead with this, and let's make the best of it and see it deliver.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Philip?
Thank you. Thanks for this so far. I mean, you answered in relation to the Chair's question about business and the importance of energy in terms of the cost, but also the transition to green energy, and that's obviously the executive has its own targets with relation to that, and Climate Act plays a crucial point in it, and it goes beyond businesses to general society and consumers. And the petroleum licensing decision the other day, I think, is welcome. But from a point of view of reaching the targets, I'm just thinking, because I know myself, I've had a lot of contact recently from onshore, offshore, wind energy in relation to that. So I'm just wondering, what do we need to do to achieve more onshore and offshore wind energy to help with our energy targets?
Well, we have said repeatedly, and it's not just a cliche, the net zero ambition is a whole of executive commitment, and we won't achieve the targets unless all of the executives involved. So we have close working relationship with DAERA. We have close engagement with infrastructure, because that's going to be key in terms of planning and things like that. We are engaging, and we had been, we now have to engage again with MOD in relation to offshore and some of the sites that might be identified. So the thing is, what we have to do is move at pace with all of these. So there are challenges. One is planning, but also grid connectivity. And interestingly, when we were having the conversation at the British Irish Council last week in Edinburgh last Friday morning, everybody was talking about grid connectivity, including the British Prime Minister. They all have challenges with grid connectivity, and so there has to be investment in that to make sure if we're going to create all of the renewables that we want to create, if we're going to move, and that gives us energy sustainability, does all of the contributions in terms of businesses we do, but also meets our challenges in relation to net zero, then that's what we have to do. So it has to be a whole of executive approach. We are very heavily engaged. We have energy strategies. We have the executive engaged in terms of the steps that we need to take to do that, but we have to move at pace. And we have to have all of the departments moving in the same direction. And there are enormous opportunities and benefits for us, not just in terms of the planet and what we need to do to make our contribution to net zero, but there are enormous opportunities for our businesses in terms of getting involved in that work on the manufacturing side, our universities and the innovation side, but also in terms of energy security and stability of energy price for us. So there are big challenges, but if we don't approach this in a whole of executive way, and that's the same for the South, that's the same for Britain, same for Scotland and Wales, and we had these conversations last week. We're all facing the same challenges, and we all know that the same solutions are in the same area, and that is moving at pace across a range of areas and making sure that we equip all of the necessary parts of that, regulators, all of the rest, in order to everybody be pulling in the same direction in that regard.
And moving at pace, as you've said, is crucial, and we have groups from the sector in front of us. I mean, they would be critical that to this point we probably haven't been moving at pace, and you mentioned planning. One of their criticisms has been the length of time for these projects to get through planning, and they've outlined the levels of investment in the South in comparison to here. So I'm just wondering, in terms of your conversation with the Infrastructure Minister, when will we see decisions being made that allow sort of the pace to be lifted?
Well, I know that he has bid for support in the transformation fund to work. Some of the parties here will be aware. I'm not sure if they're all around the same table, but when we got together as parties before the executive came back last year, and the conversation we were having about executive priorities, planning was one of them. People recognise that the planning system and also clearly investment in water and sewage infrastructure, but those are the things that are potentially going to trip up the ambitions in terms of development of green energy, but in development generally. So there was a recognition, all parties recognised that was a priority for any incoming executive. So obviously, a bit like ourselves and McGee, we lead on it, but it's an executive priority. So I know that John has bid for transformation funding to assist him in trying to reshape the planning system to speed that up, to make sure it's more efficient and delivers quicker results. So we fully support him in that, and I know around the executive people are fully supportive of that, because we recognise that that can trip up all of our ambitions in terms of our own departmental objectives if we don't get that resolved. So we'll continue to work at that and try and get change there as quickly as possible. But there are a whole range of areas that we have to be working on this. And of course, you're right, we had a conversation with people involved in the Pathfinder projects, and they're saying that there's conversations going on everywhere. We need a way to knit those together and turn them into a kind of a project action plan in relation to all of the areas that we need to cover in biomethane, geothermal, wind, solar, offshore, onshore. All of those areas need to be moving at pace together.
Okay. And just to change track then, the electronic travel authorisation, this has been mentioned and raised with you numerous times in the Assembly. I mean, is there any movement or development? I mean, we've heard the Labour government at Westminster talking about a reset with Europe, in terms of your discussion. Is there any light at the end of the tunnel with regard to that?
Well, I suppose in broad terms, firstly, you would hope that kind of immigration angst which the Conservatives had isn't part of this new administration. Or the card that they wanted to play in relation to immigration isn't part of the new administration. The relationship with Europe is much better. It has been reset according to their own description, and there's much better work, so there's much more scope for an actual decent working relationship in that regard. I have gone over and met the Home Office Minister responsible. We outlined very clearly to them. We hadn't got an engagement in the last days of the previous administration, so we had a meeting in Whitehall about a month ago. I was over. We undertook to provide her additional material in relation to the impact on tourism, the fact that 70% of our international visitors arrive through Dublin Airport that come north. So we have outlined all of that, and we've undertaken to provide more information and more evidence in that regard. We haven't got a commitment to change or do anything with it, but we are making the argument, we're providing the support and evidence to that argument.
Okay, and then finally, Chair, I mean, we had the debate yesterday and the vote on the continuation of our relationship with the EU, an important result. But during that debate, some of us spoke longer than others in relation to at length in relation to the importance of their own viewpoint on dual market access, and there was a lot of discussion about when the Chief Executive of Invest NI was here and what he said and all the rest of it. I mean, I listened back to what he said and I'm pretty clear in my own head what he said in relation to that. But you in your introduction talked about dual market access being important within the department and your promotion of it in Europe and further afield. So, I mean, could you give us an assessment just of how important do you think dual market access can be to businesses here in the time ahead?
Well, I mean, I heard what Kieran said, and I mean, there's no big flash on the other side of the protocol being agreed in terms of that, and nor would it be expected. Business doesn't move in that way. They don't take investment decisions overnight. International business particularly doesn't, when there's a whole lot of global uncertainty, war in Ukraine, Middle East, change of administration coming through in Britain, change of administration and happening in the States. All of these things have impacts in terms of international investment decisions, and so you have to recognise that this is a small little place, even though this is an important factor for us. But yes, there is significant interest there. I mean, from my perspective and perspective, I presume from the majority of people who were voting last night, Brexit was a bad idea and still is a bad idea, and it's going to continue to create problems for us. And the conversation about electronic travel authorisation flows directly from Brexit. The conversations we're having about access to labour and all the challenges that presents flows directly from Brexit. We do have an opportunity in terms of the protocol outcome, in terms of dual market access, to undo some of that damage. And what we have to do is firstly make sure that our own businesses understand the opportunities for them. So businesses who were in the game of exporting into Europe are telling us now they don't see any change, and we're saying that's actually the benefit, because businesses who are in that game in Britain see change. They now see barriers and obstacles in relation to how they do business with Europe. The businesses here don't see that. Now, we will have ongoing East-West challenges, which we need to continue to work at and resolve to make sure that we have the smoothest possible arrangements, East to West, as well as North to South and into Europe. And I'm not describing all of this to the dual market access. Our exports were up. That bucks the trend. We're usually the lower of any economic trend. Our exports were up. Exports in Britain were down. And our companies, so in the first instance we want to make sure our own companies understand the opportunities for them, and Invest has done a piece of work of research in saying which of the areas, which of the sectors that would benefit most from this, so that people understand, it's not doesn't apply to services, so it's not going to be a benefit to people in that business, but it applies to goods. And that, so we've done that. We've also then, obviously, in terms of international, we've been in the States and we've been in Canada. We've been speaking about. There is an interest in this. People know that this is a unique feature we have. They want to know more about it, how it works, what it will mean for their particular business. And we've also done that now in Europe as well. We will continue. There's a programme to continue that in Europe. So we're continuing to generate interest around this. And but I don't see, and I didn't ever see this happening in an overnight sort of flash. This is going to be a slower burner, but it out of a bad Brexit situation, it gives us an advantage, and we need to take advantage of that. And that's why Intertrade, Invest NI, the department generally, are trying to provide as much information out there to our own firms, but also to potential international investors.
Minister, the remarks by the Chief Executive of Invest NI that there hasn't been a single additional investment as a result of dual market access in terms of any investment in Northern Ireland, that was correct then?
Well, they have the statistics for what the investments are, but I have to say I've travelled with them and there is significant interest. We know that there's significant interest in that. When that actually materialises in terms of investment, it will involve a whole range of other decisions as well. But there is an interest. People do see this as something which is unique to this part of the world, which is an advantage, which makes them consider that. I have to say, for me also, because I think, in an era where FDI, where we have almost full employment, FDI is still very important, but we also need to spend an awful lot of our focus growing our own firms. And we do see increased export activity in relation to our own firms as well. So if you ask a specific question about one part of the economy, the answer might suit your particular narrative. But if you look at the economy as a whole, overarching, then we might have a different
I just wanted to make it clear, because there was some challenge, and listen, that's what a debating chamber is for, but you have no examples that would contradict the remarks made by the Chief Executive.
I don't wish to, sorry, just to be clear, Chair, I don't wish to contradict the remarks made by the Chief Executive. What I'm saying is that's a particular narrow focus, and it's correct. But he also knows, as I know, the interest that is there and how Invest NI work for years to develop foreign direct investment interest. They start conversations, and that works through for a number of years until you get the result of that. That's how it works. So there's no contradiction in that regard.
The protocol that members voted to extend yesterday has been in place since 2019. We're now nearly 6 years on. Kate?
Well, that leads in nicely to my question. Thanks, Chair, and nice to see you. I think, actually, when you looked at his comments, I may be wrong, but there was the implication that FDI would follow that assumption, and may well have been in place since 2019, but the collapse of the Assembly has undoubtedly impacted that. And I wonder, when you're talking about international investment decisions and how much you think reform of the institutions is going to be important to give that certainty to businesses.
Well, I think what we find in terms of dealing with businesses, most people want, and even in a very uncertain world, they want certainty and stability. So they want to know, and you're right, the institution's been down for 2 years, did have an impact, because even in that time when we were travelling across the States and we were talking to businesses, not in any official capacity, but just as elected representatives, and we were over in Washington at St. Patrick's Night, people want to know, who do we speak to when we go over there? How do we access government? And one of the selling points that Invest have is that our government is very accessible. That doesn't happen in a lot of other places, surprisingly, but our government is very accessible, and if we have important investors come over here, we can tap into First and Deputy First Minister to meet them, to host them up here and have a conversation with them, and that all creates an impression. That's all important to people, because they want to know, if they go over to invest a lot of their money in a place and something goes awry, that they have ready access to. It's not exclusive, or it's not it's not an advantage they have over everybody else, but it is a way of supporting access. So the ability of us to remain in kind of stable place here is good. So I agree that reform of the institutions where that is necessary and where it's agreed and consistent with the Good Friday Agreement as well, then I think we'll help enhance our own stability, and in turn that impacts positively in terms of people considering investment opportunities.
And I was struck yesterday, thank you, I was struck yesterday during the debate. Obviously we have different views on Brexit and the impact of Brexit, but one thing that we can all agree on is the need for Northern Ireland to work and prosperity. And I wonder, we have this opportunity, obviously it would have been better if we hadn't left the EU, but we have this opportunity with dual market access. How optimistic are you that all your executive colleagues will be able to get together to sell this as an opportunity? Because it seems that it's still, some people are pushing it, you have been, but if we're really to sell Northern Ireland as this place to invest, we really need all those voices.
Well, I think, I've no difficult, all of my executive colleagues want to see this place prosper. So there's no difference between us and any other. We want to see growth. We want to see people getting good jobs. We want to see sufficient funding to support our public services. We're all agreed on all of those issues, and that's why we continue collectively to fight in relation to that. Maybe it's more comfortable for me to go out and sell dual market access than somebody who has issues with the protocol, so that's good, because it's no issue for me doing that. But I know when I bring back, when we talk about potential investors, people are interested and we have particular challenges around some sectors that are in a bit of state of flux at the moment, that the First and Deputy First Minister will always step in and offer support. They will always meet people. They will always, we provide information in relation to who they're meeting. They will always present a united front. They will always argue, as we do collectively, in terms of economic prosperity. So people may have different views, and it's a four-party executive. There are a lot of different political views in relation to that. We are perhaps more enthusiastically outselling dual market access than maybe other people would be comfortable with. But the outworking of that, in terms of engaging with business, there's no issue across the executive for that.
Okay, that's really positive. what I actually was going to ask, and you won't be surprised, is around paid carers leave. I was disappointed that it wasn't an outright commitment in the Good Jobs bill. And carers and I have done really excellent work on the benefit of it. So with that in mind, what assurances can you provide carers that the review into paid carers leave is going to be done on a genuine cost analysis basis and not just on the initial outlay, which is outlined?
No, listen, we're happy to look at all the information. As I say, this is a very lengthy consultation process, so there will be lots of further opportunities for the committee to engage with this, for other interested parties to engage. It's a very broad. It's a very broad piece of legislation. There are a lot of issues in there. I have said that I would like to see us in a position to be able to do paid carers leave, but that obviously depends on the amount of funds we have available. I can't decide that from within my department. That has to be an executive decision. But we want to get the best analysis possible in relation to that. So if we get to the point where we're taking a decision on that, it's based on accurate information.
Okay, thank you. And is there a time frame for the Ulster research into this? When will you expect?
I don't know. I don't know if Ian knows that, but we will ask Colin Jack and his team maybe to provide you some information on this.
The aim is to bring the legislation to the executive before the summer recess, so the policy will need to be decided at that point. So it will have to be within that kind of time.
First half of next year.
Okay.
But we could ask Colin just to provide you some specific information.
Is that the Good Jobs bill?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's just a change. We were previously advised that would.
Well, we're hoping to get it in the early part of the year, but the consultation was quite extensive, and there was a lot of information on it. It's quite a big bill, so we need to develop the full amount of the policy in it and get that agreed by the executive. And parties have expressed differing views on it, so there's quite a bit of work to be done to get that in the shape to get.
There may be some parts that are brought through by different means, that we can tack on to other provisions that are coming through. So it's not all in entirety of it going to be in the one. But the intention is to try and get that through and to start the legislative process before the year's out, because we're timing this back from obviously the end of the mandate to get it completed.
Okay. Padraig?
Thank you, Minister, for your responses so far. I want to touch on 3 areas that have been developing since you've taken office. First one's around Magee. Second's around the airport, and the third is around business development. So in terms of Magee, obviously since you've taken over, we've seen 500 new students, commitment to PhD, research places, 15 million from your department in terms of capital funding, and 45 million from the Southern Government. So all really, really positive, good announcements. In terms of engagement going forward, what engagement has there been with the Southern Government to date? And what engagement will there be for the incoming year?
Well, we are obviously in between administrations at the moment, so our last kind of formal North-South stuff ended about a month ago. But yeah, we will pick that up. Whoever's appointed into both sort of formally with whoever becomes Taoiseach, because the Taoiseach's office is where a lot of the shared island funding emanates from. But also then in terms of whoever's appointed into further and higher education. There was a great enthusiasm for initiatives in the Northwest when in the last administration. We want to capitalise on that and get support there. So the task force itself set a number of questions to the government in the south. They were answered. Now it was different because it was in the time of the election, so it was probably more of a civil service response than a ministerial response. But nonetheless, they were answered, and they remain supportive of the expansion of the Magee project, and we will continue to engage with them in the time ahead of that.
Well, that's really positive to hear, and I think as you change from government to government, similarly to the regional balance and the other commitments here, that it's actually enshrined in policy, rather than just a kind of commitment from minister to minister. So it's really positive to hear that. In terms of Derry Airport then, again, just to touch on, since your announcement in October, we now have more than 130 flights per month going out of Derry. We have 2 new routes to Edinburgh and Liverpool. We have the extension of an existing route to Birmingham. So again, really positive in that space. How do you intend, and how can your department work to continue that sustainability and actually to continue that growth trajectory which we've seen so far?
Well, the difficulty we had was, and this became more evident during COVID when we were trying to find ways to support the airports that had closed down. So as an island, airports are critical to us. And we have 3 significant commercial ones here, and we were trying to find a way to support them, and we found that infrastructure had responsibility for some parts of it, economy had responsibility for parts of it, finance had responsibility, so it was kind of a bit of a mix-mash. So what we want to do is, from our perspective, and we have agreement with other departments in relation to this, the airports are a very significant economic contributor, because they do that connectivity off the island to Britain, and then to internationally, to north to south as well. So we want to ensure that we have a policy which supports the development of airports and recognises the economic contribution that they make, and that's why we moved to try and take the policy in relation to airports and aviation into the Department of Economy, because we had, I think, at least 2, maybe 3 different departments all having some input, and that's just a mess when you're trying to deal with issues in relation to that. So part of that responsibility then is taking responsibility for City of Derry Airport. And one of the economic instabilities they had, they were consistently reliant on ratepayers in Derry, City and Strabane to pay that contribution into the airport. The airport serves more than Derry, City and Strabane. It serves Causeway, Coast and Glens Council. It serves arguably parts of from Mallinoma. It serves Donegal as well. So it was an unfair burden on ratepayers in Derry. Plus, it didn't lend itself to the stability that you want in terms of investment in the airport and making sure that it continues to grow more routes and become a stronger part of an economic hub in the northwest. And that's a catalyst and a vitally important part of the economic growth opportunity in the northwest, is to have a functioning airport there, and not one which constantly a threat hanging over whether will it survive next year, will it survive the year after that, and has it a long-term future. So in that regard, we undertook to take that responsibility. That's a challenge, because we've been through all of the challenges that we have in the department, but we undertook, as part of that regional balance approach, as part of trying to grow the economy in a regionally balanced way, then this is a very important asset in the northwest, which makes a contribution to that. So we have undertaken to find the money to support that going forward. We obviously are working on business cases, working on with the Department of Infrastructure, because to try and sort out the barriers for how we do that. But in terms of the policy approach, we are taking airports as much as we possibly can in relation to responsibility. There are some responsibilities that are obviously reserved in Britain in relation to aviation as well, but taking that responsibility into ourselves and trying to find the finances to support Derry Airport. We've committed to doing that, so that's what we'll do in the time ahead.
Oh, and I suppose just from a local perspective, it's been very welcome in that it's allowed ratepayers in Derry to focus on projects which are, and Derry and Strabane to focus on projects which are specific to Derry and Strabane. For example, commitment to developing Templemore Sports Complex, and actually now having the funding available to plan that into the future. So I think it's lifted a huge burden, and it's actually made sure that the sustainability model is there. So it's very much welcome. Just my last point is just around business support. One of the things which a lot of businesses, and you've mentioned already, around businesses who are either starting out or attempting to grow, so that SME sector, they've mentioned around trying to get industrial space, and it's something David touches on a lot as well. In terms of trying to incubate and support those businesses, are there any plans between the department and Invest to support a strategy to develop industrial areas, industrial estate, specific land around that?
Yeah, the Invest, we met with them a couple of weeks back in relation to their development of land strategy, because they see that if you're going to do regional balance and regional growth, then if that's a fine theory, but in a practical sense you have to have land, and readily available land and service land for people to grow onto, so that you do have incubator hubs, and I visited some in Derry, and they get people to a certain point, they want to move them out, get them into a larger space to allow them to grow, and then they go beyond that and into larger again. So there is available land in Derry and City and Strabane area as it stands. But Invest and I are working on a land strategy which looks at strategic location, prioritisation of land to support the priorities that they now have and the department have in terms of regional balance, economic growth. And so they're working on that. I'm sure at some stage they'll be able to present some of the outwork. For example, we met with them about a month ago, I think, to talk through that and what their approach to that is. The
committee may have had some briefing on it. Obviously we don't want to give precise sites away, because then that starts and affects the price that people will demand for the land, but I think they have provided some information about the regional property strategy.
Yeah. And in many ways, that becomes a facilitator for regional growth. Because if there's an ambition, Invest NI will encourage people to go to certain areas, maybe incentivise them more to go to certain areas. Then, if you don't have somewhere for them to go, you're actually contradicting yourself, or you're preventing the outcome that you want. So we need to ensure that there's a regional land strategy to support and provide the facilities then for regional growth.
And I think just tied into that as well, you mentioned obviously the Skeg hub and dairy, which is really positive. But in terms of research and development, obviously that's going to be a key element in those businesses learning from other businesses who've gone through similar experiences, who maybe they can utilise that engagement and their experience as well. So is that going to be factored in to, I suppose, that overarching project of business support?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there is grant support for research and development to make sure. I mean, another of the priorities is around productivity. So we want companies to innovate more, to benefit more from skills, to upskill their people. That makes them more productive, starts to turn the dial in relation to that. And that's going to be a slow process. That's not going to happen overnight, because we have suffered traditionally from many, many decades with the worst productivity levels on these islands. So if we're going to do that, we have to try and encourage people to innovate. But what we also do is strengthen the linkages between our universities, our colleges and business, and have that kind of, and the agencies and the government department response as well, to make sure we have that synergy and that link up between them. And quite a lot of our businesses that come as spin outs from our universities, so they start off with that innovation R&D basis to them, and then they move out, and that quite a lot of successful businesses have done that. But we want to ensure that the universities are linked away to try and support business development as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. And Ian, just as accounting officer, have you been presented with a business case for the Derry City Airport support at this stage?
Not for the funding that would take place from the start of April 2025, not yet. The only one that I've been presented with so far is for the public service obligation, joint funding for the current financial year. But the business cases in both the subvention support and the public service obligation are still being worked on.
Thanks, Chair. Minister, one of the areas where I think we're missing the opportunity is around tourism. Support for major events, international events. We know the benefit of them because when they're broadcast onto screens right across the world, I think that's the best advertisement that we can give in terms of Northern Ireland. We know certainly from the perspective of the Northwest, or as my colleague Maurice Bradley talks about the north of Northern Ireland, the Causeway. We look at the International Air Show, the Open, the Northwest 200. Even at a local level, the Foyle Cup. These events bring thousands of tourists to the area, and a lot of them get a good experience and want to come back. So I suppose the question, Minister, is what do you plan to do to provide further support? A lot of them feel that they're not getting the fair share, and rightly so. One of the priorities that you talk about in the list of priorities is the priority 34, which is the Tourism NI Next Phase Growth Fund. How big a priority is it for you to support these events?
Yeah, well, it is. Tourism is a priority, which, I mean, perhaps, and I certainly get this from the tourism sector, wasn't necessarily given sufficient priority over the years. Tourism and social enterprise, for me, from an outside perspective, look to be the kind of poor relations in the department. And I get that there's a challenge for funding. So Tourism NI, if we could give them twice the amount of money they have, they would support twice as much activity as they continue to support, and that's always the challenge. So people feel they don't get enough. I happened to have a conversation yesterday with Northwest 200 people who are really committed and provide an excellent event, and whether we could give them more support. I know Causeway Coast and Glen are linked in with them as well. But we do give them support, and we will continue to try and improve that. But that's the challenge we have. So tourism is very important. That's why we put together the Tourism Task Force to bring people together. I had hoped it would report before the year was out, but it looks like it's probably be early into the new year before it provides a report. Of course, the challenge is then to match the financial commitments with what they would like to do. But I get, and I've always got this, events-based tourism is a critical part of that. So we have all of the ability to create spectacular and wonderful events here, from small community things right up to the open golf, and in that way attract other visitors into the area. And of course Tourism Ireland then can link into that in terms of the international promotion. And we saw when the Irish Open was in Newcastle earlier this year, the TV coverage that was getting, but we had a specific tourism intervention in there. So that we, in the adverts that were going in, we're highlighting tourism right across the north and across the island generally, and trying to attract more visitors, trying to encourage more, because the big international audience, and that will be done in terms of the Open then when it's up in Portrush next year, to make sure that we actually maximise the international exposure that we get, and we channel that in a way which is beneficial to business, but also that we encourage in terms of how that is delivered, usage of local firms to try and make sure that and that they in turn build skills on how to work with events and competitions like that, so we actually get a much more skilled and receptive and responsive business ecosystem around those events as well, that are able to benefit from them.
No, I welcome that. I think that we just need to focus in terms of providing that fund. I know there's a lot of priorities, but this benefits, as I say, not just the tourism benefit, but also, we hear from the hospitality sector who need support. This is one way of supporting them, and I think that they really, if it wasn't for these type of events, many of those businesses would be closing their doors, particularly when you look at the North Coast and the importance of those events. Just to move on, the Chair asked the question around the airport. I think that the council already have the money spent already, yet haven't.
Well, we have, as I said, we have given a commitment. It's not
and haven't received it. So that's an important clarification in terms of where it is at. I suppose and again, I would declare regularly. My wife's a member of the board at the airport. My question is around new routes. We need to support all the airports. Of course, I'm going to advocate for the local one, but we need to support all airports in terms of the new routes. One of the recommendations in the York Aviation report was around looking at the risk sharing arrangements, the potential obviously for the department to underwrite the losses on new routes until obviously they're profitable. What are you looking at in that respect in terms of trying to bring new routes to Northern Ireland?
Well, one of the key ones, and we had dialogue in relation to that in the States, and a couple of times we visited over the course of the year, is the linkage to the States. So we have no direct link from here other than through Dublin Airport to the United States. There was a direct link at one stage through New York Airport, and it just for business purposes didn't survive. It was over the COVID period as well, I think, so that obviously was challenging for any airline. So we're continuously trying to see who's it might be in the market for providing a connection there. So that would be very critically important in terms of international visitors, even though, we're a small island. It's not a huge distance across. We view it from our own perspective in terms of distance and travel time and all of that once you're here, but it's relatively small when you look at other countries. But still, I think it's recognised in terms of our tourism. When I talk to tour operators, have done so in the States and in Canada a couple of times, and in London as well. When we talk to them, that connectivity is very important. So we're continuously trying to look at ways, but of course those are commercial decisions that people will take. We have that air passenger duty support, but we haven't been able to use it because we haven't had somebody commercially that's willing to come in and provide that for long haul routes.
In terms of the risk sharing arrangements that the York Aviation report referred to, is that something that you're looking at? Is it?
That report was very useful in terms of pointing up things, that we knew in terms of development of that. There will be renewed discussions in relation to Derry Airport about the Derry to Dublin, Belfast to Cork routes as well, which we had raised under the previous administration there. So we will pick those up as well. Those can be very useful sources of income and sources of business for Derry Airport. But yes, we continue to look at that, and we do provide, the focus of the discussion here has been on Derry Airport, but we do engage with and provide support to International and City Airport as well.
Two very brief points, and they're short answers hopefully. In terms of the McGee Task Force, the launch is on Monday. Have you actually seen the report, and have you had any input in terms of, I take it the report that's published on Monday is the full report that has been created by the task force and hasn't been changed in any way by the department?
No, I mean it's not our objective to change. It's our objective to support it. So we have now full-time officials working with the McGee Task Force, which they very much value and welcome because it gives them that level of support. It also demonstrates the commitment from the department. We have somebody employed to assist them in the writing of the report, but this is the McGee Task Force report. So I've seen a draft But the finished report is decided by them. We will offer whatever support they think they need in relation to that, but it's their report, and I look forward to very much to obviously get the opportunity to fully accept the final version, and to then begin the process of supporting the university and the implementation of the report.
And you don't sign off the final report, that's signed off by the
No.
task force. Just a very final question.
Sorry, could I just clarify a point? You specifically asked, has the department changed anything in the report? The report came to us for factual corrections and checks, so we have actually requested some factual things be changed in it. Okay, so just to make sure that the committee is entirely clear that we have actually asked for some things to be changed. However, as the Minister has said, the conclusions of the task force and their recommendations are entirely theirs to make. They are not the department's, we have not.
Yeah. Okay. So as I say, it is in the spirit of assisting to make sure that the facts that are in it are absolutely correct. Of course, the university also would have provided them with some factual information as well, and other departments fed into their conclusions as well. But as Ian says, their conclusions are their conclusions.
You say factual, you mean like
numbers being wrong and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, very final. We've only received this morning, the SEM provision query that we had. Just a very brief one. Obviously, you had met with Alma White, which is very welcome. You had mentioned one of the areas in it was around time frame, but it doesn't say, in terms of the time frame, when do you see, you talk about obviously the need, or scoping the need, whether we need legislation or amended legislation. Given obviously the short time left in the mandate, that needs to be done as a matter of urgency. I suppose in terms of the time frame, what is it for that?
There's a cross-departmental group which has been put together for senior officials. It's been headed up by our department, but it involves health, education, communities, bringing together, because again, it's one of these areas where people have talked about. There hasn't been any specific focus. Nobody has taken up the ball to run with it in that regard, and we have done that in conversation with the Alma and the campaign group around all of that. So what we're examining is around areas of provision, and then where there are gaps. So there's a lot of statutory provision already there. The question is it actually functioning properly? Is it working? Is it delivering what it needs to deliver? We want to make sure we can do that. The question of legislation, we aren't yet at a space where we would know what legislation is required in order to fill gaps that might be there, and that would probably be cross-departmental. So I would be very upfront and answer the question in the Assembly last week in relation to this. The chances of us having that work done and legislation drafted, consulted on, passed in this mandate are probably very tight. But nonetheless, I'm committed to doing legislation if we find that is what is required. And I think if we want to work at pace throughout the rest of this mandate, fix the provision where we can fix it, make sure the things that should be working are working, where there's other provision required, try and provide that. And if the outcome of that is that we require more legislation to make sure there's delivery in other areas, then I would want to commit the incoming mandate to deliver that. And we certainly will leave a piece of work which should be picked up. And I know there's a broad interest across the Assembly in this, so I don't see any reason why it should not be picked up in the next mandate and run with if there's legislation required. I think it would be unfair to promise that in this mandate and then not deliver. These people are very passionate about what they do. They're understandably very impatient because they have young people needing provision. I get that, I accept that entirely, but I don't want to present some false promises that I can't deliver. But we will work on provision, we will work on identifying the gaps, and then if that requires legislation, and it may well do, we are committed to making sure that happens into the future.
Diana?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. Yeah, it's been quite a broad-ranging morning, so thank you for your responses. I wanted to ask you about RHI, excuse me, where the department is with terminating the RHI non-domestic scheme, and in particular the buyout, because there seems to be a differential between what the department is asking for or is offering and what the Renewable Heat Association is seeking. Can you confirm, is that something in the region of 200 million?
Well, I can't really get into it. You understand there's a negotiation going on here between what people consider that they want and what they might feel they're entitled to, and what's actually affordable, and what, in terms of the public purse, that needs to be fixed here and is justifiable in terms of the public purse. So this is a mess I inherited. I've said this several times. It's not one we created, and it should have been fixed under the last mandate. It should have been fixed by the last executive, and sufficient papers were not brought in time in order to allow an executive to take a decision on it. We're now picking that up and trying to move. There's a clear commitment to close this scheme down. And we, in the interim, we had wanted to work on the tariffs, but the view of the Assembly was not to go with the proposals that we had brought forward, which was unfortunate. And I get that some people felt they hadn't sufficient information to make decisions in that regard. We need to make sure that we have all of the information when this comes back to the committee and the people in the committee in order, because we're now moving to closure of the scheme. We want to do it in a way which is fair to people, and we recognise that an awful lot of people are invested in this on the basis of a fair proposition, and they were encouraged to by the department at the time, and invested money in this, and we need to make sure it's fair to people. We also need to try and get it closed down, because it does not do what it was intended to do. It doesn't make the contribution to carbon reduction that it was intended to do, and we are foregoing opportunities to do other schemes while we're trying to complete and close this off. So there is not money from our block grant, there's annually managed expenditure money, AMI money, that's available to us and we can't access because we haven't come to a decision. So the sooner we get to a decision, the sooner we get those negotiations concluded, get a fair closure to this scheme and get moving forward with it, and then look to other schemes that can actually make a contribution to carbon reduction, then the better. This should have been done years ago, but we're trying to pick it up now.
Can I just
add to that? You mentioned the figure of £200 million. It's not a number I recognise or anywhere close to that in any part of the discussions we've had inside the department. I'm not sure where the figure has come from, but it's certainly not one that we're working with.
And ultimately, who will the Treasury pay this settlement? Or will the Treasury, will they settle this?
As long as what we're doing is satisfactory and it's actually doing what was agreed by all of the parties to do, which is to close the scheme. So, we have to use Treasury's money to try and do this. So it has to be satisfactory to them. But we also want to be in a position that we can access other money to do other schemes as well. So in that regard, there's a lot of plates being juggled here at the same time. But as Ian said, there will be figures bandied about which aren't reflective of reality. And what we need to do is, when we get to a position where we have a proposition which we bring to the executive and get through, and then obviously discuss with yourselves as a committee, that we get moving on that as quickly as can, and try and make sure that people have all of the information that's available to them. But as I say, the principles of this is that we get to a point of closure, we do it in a way which is fair to those who genuinely engage with it, but we need to bring this to a close.
Thank you. David.
Thank you, Minister. A lot of what sort of business comes to us about is quite not. You've said this is across other departments as well, or the influence. And Kate's already brought about stability there and reform. But the second one we get is planning, and you've spoken a bit about that. But what are the department doing, or can you talk us through exactly what the department are doing to lobby or work with DFI to see the changes that we need to see for our business, for the energy market, for inward investment to allow this to grow? Well,
it's Richard Rogers, who you'll know, be familiar, who's been, I'm sure, in front of you a number of times. What we're trying to, maybe Ian could expand this, I think the broad point is we recognise that if we are going to do what we need to do in terms of renewable energy and meet targets, that we can't do it under the current planning system. And that's not to set aside planning policy, because I think the policy area of it is not that problematic. It's the processes that are the challenge. So Richard would be in dialogue, and we have had conversations with John Rowd as well about the need to ensure, when I say a whole of executive approach, if we're and DAERA working with us are putting forward projects which will, as I say, help reduce our carbon emissions, but also give us energy security and stability, which is obviously very beneficial to us, then we need to make sure that the other departments are all faced in the same direction. So that's an ongoing conversation.
So I'm going to meet the Permanent Secretary of DFI and some of his senior officials tomorrow afternoon to talk specifically about planning issues in relation to renewable energy. And so there are three strands to that. One is the planning policy statement that needs to be ratified in relation to that, because under the current rules there's very little space in Northern Ireland in which you can erect a wind turbine. So those need to be updated to reflect the position more closely to what's in Scotland and in the Republic. The second item then is what we can do in relation to speeding up the applications that go through the process. So there is some work we potentially can do with statutory consultees, and that will be requiring a bit of cross-departmental work on that. And then the third item would be for those applications which are in the appeals process, and the Planning Appeals Commission is taking quite a long time to get round through the casework. And in fact, there's one significant wind farm application which will be about 3% of our total energy requirements, which is awaiting Planning Appeals Commission consideration, and it won't be heard until 2026. So obviously we need to see what we can do to move some of those cases along a bit faster. So I'll be discussing practical measures that we can take around that. Then also DFI, or certainly its arm's length bodies, are quite substantial landowners in Northern Ireland, and around a sixth of the land surface area of Northern Ireland is owned by executive departments or their arm's length bodies, and we aren't really making use of that for renewable energy generation. So not just NI Water, but also the Forest Service would be significant landowners in locations which were at a right kind of elevation to be useful for wind generation. So be talking to DFI around what we can do to work on all of those sorts of things. More generally about the constraint which the planning system is placed on economic development. I think the Department for Infrastructure is certainly very grasped of that, and the Permanent Secretary has been talking to me about what can be done to improve the efficiency and performance of the planning system, and there's quite a wide variation in the performance of the individual councils in terms of timeframes for delivery, and if we can have some performance improvement work done across the whole system, it will certainly speed up a lot of those applications. After that, you're into infrastructure is some of the issues. We're doing the work in the grid connection policy. We mentioned that earlier on. So the utility regulator has agreed the new price control period will run for 7 years from the 1st of April next year. That will see £2.2 billion invested in the electricity infrastructure network. So that's one aspect of it. Then you're into water and sewage. So as part of the regional property strategy, Invest NI is talking to NI Water about where they can get the connections that they need, which sites would be suitable for that purpose, and what else we might be able to do as part of the development of potential industrial development land to support that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for a comprehensive answer. The next thing that we get from business, and we had last week Federation here and hospitality and retail, is around that taxation piece, around the rates, and specifically rates in their case are not getting the rates relief, and they're been taxed to the point of almost closure. A lot of cases. Is there what work, again, this is Department of Finance, appreciate that, but what work is coming from the Department of Economy to try and look at how we get a progressive tax system that's fair across all of our economy?
Well, obviously rates and any engagement with Treasury is the Department of Finance, because I know this from my previous experience. As I say, we did reduce rates, and it was a constant conversation with, and I get that tourism and hospitality operate on very fine margins, and then energy costs hit them. So we can actually do more work on energy and try and support people in getting into a more stable energy environment than we can in terms of taxation. But when we were there, when I was in finance, we made representation in relation to VAT levels for tourism and the differential north and south, which puts them at a competitive disadvantage here. So we've been making those cases, but I have to say, not with any real sense of movement from Treasury in relation to them. So rates brings us in a certain proportion of money, which helps to support health and education and all of the other public services we want to spend money on. So it's always a fine balance to make sure that we do get some return from rates, but we don't do it in a way which crucifies businesses. And obviously, when you're talking to people who are struggling, they will point to those issues. But other taxation issues are responsibility for Treasury, and I don't doubt that the Finance Minister makes regular representation to them, because I did when I was in finance, because you were regularly getting asked to raise these issues. Whether under a new administration there's any more scope for movement on these, I don't know, because I haven't had that level of engagement with them. But from our perspective, we support people through energy support. We obviously promotion in tourism, promote areas, promote businesses, promote. We had engagement with NI Food the other day, which we're working collaboratively with DERA to try and promote our food industry and that aspect of that, which is in the hospitality sector, to try and put together. There was a very successful year of food I think about 10 years ago or 8 years ago, but they're aiming for 2026 to run that again. That had a very significant benefit in terms of our hospitality industries, and a lot of people reported very significant outcome from that. So we are taking initiatives around all that to try and promote, to try and encourage, to try and do that. But direct taxation is not within our gift, unfortunately.
Ask a question if you have one. No.
Yeah, I was just quickly. I was just going to ask then: is there any work been done around corporation tax here?
Well, again, it's again a matter for finance to engage with. From my perspective, and I'll give this quickly because I've said this a number of times, unless Treasury come with a different formula in relation to this, if their formula remains, we will calculate what the loss to us will be. We will take that up front from the block grant, and you will have to try and get the benefit back off that over subsequent years. Then that's going to leave our public services whole below the waterline. So the way it's presented to us, I get the differential. I have to say, when we're doing international visits, things like skills and people are much more important than levels of corporation tax when we engage with potential international investors. But the way it has been presented by Treasury over the last 10 years, I just personally believe it's not a way which will be affordable for the executive.
Last but not least, Mr. Buckley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everybody. Good morning. Still morning at this stage. First question is along the lines of green energy. So I know the Minister believes in the significant potential of biomethane, particularly in Northern Ireland. When are we going to have a biomethane strategy?
There is a call for evidence currently out. Yeah. I'm not sure the time frame. It's been out now for a couple of months.
I think it's just finished.
Is it? Right.
When would we anticipate having a strategy?
Have you any idea when they're?
Well, we had quite a positive response from it, but the nature of the responses is very detailed. So we're working through what that call for evidence has told us about the sector, and we're working very closely with local businesses to design something will actually work effectively for us. So
and it's not a trap question, but do we have a rough timescale when we're expecting the strategy?
Couldn't commit to one at the minute. I have tendency, as the chair's already noted, to be a little bit optimistic when I think these things will be finished. So I will I'll decline for that.
Yeah. What we will get is the people in the energy side are dealing with that to correspond with the committee, just to give you an update in relation to that.
Is the Minister aware of the Pathfinder programme contained?
Yeah. Yes. I actually met them on
What's the Minister's view in relation to that programme?
Well, I think there's potential there, and they have pulled together a very good team. They're due to meet early in the new year. They are looking at what the possibility is in specific area projects. Of course, the challenge is always going to be in getting biomethane to a level which is affordable as against current gas provision. So that's going to be an ongoing challenge. But with people there from the academic side, from the business side, from community, with people from different departments involved in that Pathfinder group. So the sooner they get down, we did announce, I think, earlier in the year the formation of it, but it has taken some time to get to the space where it's actually meeting. It is to meet early in the new year. I met some of the people involved on Monday just to reassure them and encourage them to continue with that work.
That's encouraging to hear that is a priority. I listened to other members' questions, and I'm glad that they've looked back on my comments to the Chief Executive of InvestNI, because I think I place a lot of importance in the weight of InvestNI and indeed their significance to growing our economy as an organisation. And I suppose that leads me on to my question today. So I'm led to believe that 4 senior directors of InvestNI with approximately 80 years of experience between them under the CEO have resigned and are leaving the organisation over the next 3.5 months after being asked to reapply for their current jobs. Is that the Minister's understanding?
No, it's not.
Okay.
The Lyons review, which you would have been aware of, was very, very critical of InvestNI. It was probably one of the most critical reports that I've seen in my time in public life. But it recommended a restructuring at very senior level. So where there were previously 4 people at that level doing a number of jobs, InvestNI have created 3 posts, which I think it's
Chief Operating Officer, which looks after the organisation. There's Chief Development Officer, which will cover the stuff mostly in Northern Ireland, and then the Chief Commercial Officer, which will look after external trade.
So the 4 senior posts that were there were no longer in existence. People were offered the opportunity to apply for the new posts that have been created, and it seems that a number of people have taken the opportunity just to leave the organisation. So it wasn't the case that people had the opportunity to apply for the new reconfiguration matches recommendations of the Lyons report, and there was an opportunity for people to apply for those posts.
We don't deny the fact that 4 senior directors of Invest NI have resigned and are leaving the organisation, whether it's restructuring, but they are leaving, those 4.
Yes, there are. I mean, that is a constant
Yeah.
at all organisations. You have that turnover, the people leave and move on,
and that's something
that is a challenge. Which, I mean, we have had many discussions with Chief Executive on the board, Chairman on the board of Invest NI, about moving that process as quickly to recruit new people and making sure the organisation stays stable and able to deliver what it needs to do.
Oscar Wilde once said, to lose 1 may be regarded as a misfortune, to lose 2 looks careless, but 4 out of 4, is there something that we're not understanding as a committee? We constantly hear from Invest NI to business about the importance of succession planning, and it's crucial to business success. But here we have, at a period of restructuring, a minister who has set out a vision for Invest NI as well. How do you expect that organisation to deliver on your objectives in the short term with such significant gaps in experience at the very height of the organisation?
Well, I am reassured by the Invest NI itself and its board that they will continue to do that. This organisation is not in a space of natural succession planning. This was an organisation that was a subject to a very extensive review, a very critical review, which pointed out a number of serious gaps which had developed over many years in terms of its approach to how it was doing business. The majority of those now, the recommendations, have been either implemented or are well on their way to being implemented, and part of that was a restructuring of its senior executive team. So that's what's happened. That is going to create a challenge, but we are assured, and of course, as I say, it was an option for the people whose posts were discontinued to apply for the new posts. They chose, and we can't force people to stay on and work if they choose to leave. They chose to take retirement packages or wherever else they intend to go to, and move on. And Invest NI are going to work very, very quickly and to ensure that those 3 posts that are now there at the senior executive level are filled with people of competence and people that can continue to do the challenge and the work that we have set out for Invest.
Okay. Is the Minister aware of the Product Regulations and Metrology Bill passing through Parliament? Has the Minister been asked to seek a legislative consent motion in that regard?
Yes, I have actually engaged with the Minister responsible in Whitehall, but we have been back and forward with it over the last number of months. This will kind of work on the issues which are thrown up in terms of new trading arrangements. Have we to do legislative consent for it?
It's a technical question about whether it's necessary or not, I think, and we're still resolving that in terms of what the content of the legislation in England would be.
When do you anticipate to have further detail on that?
I think the intention is to get it done in fairly sharpish.
Yeah, working to whatever the UK government's
the pace of this is dictated from Whitehall. What we're doing is responding to how it might impact here and what consent might or might not be required in relation to it. I know that's why I was there. I know it's been back and forth a few times around what may be considered necessary, but the pace in terms of how this is developing has been done in London. But my understanding is that they want to move at pace and get this issue legislated for first.
Specifically, weights and measures here always mirror what happens in Britain. So it's not a divergence point. It's more a question of how those 2 things align.
Just interesting. Finally, from me, obviously a number of members have mentioned air connectivity. So the Minister's air route development policy, how does that differ from the previous Minister's Northern Ireland route development scheme?
Well, I don't think there was. The challenge was that you have responsibility for aviation, you have responsibility for other aspects of airports, responsibility for air route development. They weren't connected and joined up. So that's why, from our COVID experience and from ongoing dialogue with the airports, we were of the view that it was much better if we housed as much in relation to airport policy under the one roof as we possibly could. And that's the difference, that we were trying to make sure that that is a joined up approach. Of course, in terms of development of air routes, those are commercial decisions. What you try and do is encourage, support and engage with people, and again, back to if people are considering investing in our routes here, we will obviously engage with them and whoever they want to talk to in that regard, make sure the airports are geared up to consider all of that. But they are essentially commercial decisions. But the difference is that we're trying to, rather than have this disparate approach, so if somebody was considering in relation to an air route or engagement or investment in an airport, instead of having to come over and talk to 3 different ministers about 3 different aspects of it, then they can come over and talk to one.
The City of Derry Airport has received a lot of attention at the committee. So the business plan has not been received by the department, that's right? That's what you confirmed earlier, Ian, yes?
Being worked on by
being
the
worked on.
department.
Yeah.
Is it the expectation of the department and the minister that the plan will contain significant detail on the catchment area?
Well, I suppose the business plan would. I'm assuming, I haven't seen the business plan as yet, but the business plan would look at the sustainability of the business and very much the sustainability of Derry Airport. Or its customer base is quite a lot of it. And my understanding, the North West colleagues might know better, but my understanding, a lot of its business emanates from Donegal.
Yeah. Are we expecting an impact assessment on other airports such as Belfast International, for example?
Well, we haven't had, I mean, in all of the times we've provided support to airports, people haven't been challenging in relation to that. They recognise that Derry is in a particular location. But if we receive any representation from the other airports, we certainly consider that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, and that just leads me on to my final question, Minister. And since taking office, have you issued any ministerial directions to your Permanent Secretary?
Have I ever told you to do anything?
Yes, on the flooding scheme in February, it was the larger sums of money to go to flooding. So the advice I got from the economist was the only way of knowing whether that scheme would represent value for money would be to basically run the scheme and then see whether it represented value for money. So I wasn't able to get a statement to the satisfying and development value for money point at the time it was set. So I had to put that to the Minister for approval.
Are you currently considering any other ministerial directions to issue to your Permanent Secretary? No. Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I know our finance officials, it was much harder to ask questions because we haven't got a settlement, so I assume once we have a settlement, then the committee will be keen to have a discussion with you.
And there are a couple of pieces of information I think
we'll follow up on
on
correspondence. Can I firstly thank the officials for all your work since the institutions have returned. Your dedication to the Northern Ireland economy has been really, really excellent, so thank you very much for that. Minister, this committee is hopefully your 5th critical friend, but we will support you in everything that you continue to do, and thank you for your work, and I can wish you and your family all a enjoyable Christmas.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Okay, colleagues, just to summarise on that, are members content that we just seek a written update in relation to the Good Jobs Bill in relation to the legislation? There does seem to be some slightly different timelines. Previously it was January 26th that we were told that would come. Sorry members, we will take a short recess in a minute, but if we could just do this sort out and then we'll... if that's okay.
We're very disciplined.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, are members content that we seek a written detail from the Minister's Department in relation to the expected timing of the Good Jobs Bill, but also any relevant legislation that he or regulations that he intends to deliver some of his Good Jobs Bill through? Members content that we do that?
Yep.
Okay. Secondly, then, biomethane strategy. So, call for evidence has taken place. I'm not an expert, but I assume they would then have to go out to consultation because a call for evidence is an informal process, so there may have to be a consultation before a strategy is developed, but it may be useful for us to seek advice on that. Clark, I may have missed others.
No, just the revised submissions. Just to advise members that the quality of what we got from the department was actually very good. It's much, much better than I've ever seen before from any department ever. But having said that, they then went and said, "Oh, look, it's not quite right." Right. But there you go. But no, they did give us quite a lot of detail. And sorry, if the chair will indulge me, just. What the department said was they couldn't recognise the £200 million number on RHI. Right, yes, that's where it comes from. The audit office gave one number, RHA gave a different number. If you subtract one from the other, you get 200+ million. That's where it's coming from. So the Permanent Secretary appeared surprised. I'm surprised he's surprised. So it was.
We'll follow up on that.
Anyway, okay, right.
Is there anything else any colleagues wanted to follow it up on? If not, can I have members' agreement that we suspend until 11:50?
Chairperson, before we suspend, might I suggest, look, I hate tabling correspondence because you don't have time to look at it. So are you happy for me to put it back into the next meeting pack so you maybe have a wee bit more time to ruminate on it, if that's okay, Chairperson?
Agreed.
Yeah.
And then we'll recommence in public session.
11 what, sorry?
50.
Committee Room 30. Sound. 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 Committee Room 30, 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 sound.
Start in formal session. I'm just going to take us back to item 4 at this stage, draft minutes. Page 7 of your pack, members, are the minutes of our deliberations from last week. Are members content that I sign those as a true and accurate reflection?
Is that agreed, members?
Is that agreed?
Yep.
Thank you. Item 5 then, matters arising. Does any member wish to raise any issue in the minutes that won't cover in the agenda today? Nope. Okay. We're then going to move to item number 7, which is student loans and maintenance grants 25-26. The committee will now receive oral and written evidence from the department in respect of student loans and maintenance grants. There are table packs and information on this at 204, 213, 220 and 222. Welcome all our colleagues from the department: Mark Lee, Director of Higher Education; Graham Miller, Assistant Director; Johnny O'Callaghan, Head of HE Student Support; and Siobhan Martin, the Deputy Principal in the department. Happy to hand over to colleagues at this stage.
Okay, so just make a few introductory comments very briefly. So thank you for inviting us here today, and good morning to you all, to provide a bit of an overview of arrangements in place for student loans, interest rates and related matters. So student loan system is just one element of the financial package which underpins the local higher education sector. So it might be worth setting a small amount of that context. We provide funding really across 3 areas of budget cover: funding to the institutions, funding for research, and funding for student support. Funding to the institutions is in the form of a teaching grant and targeted allocations, scored as resource DEL and funded from the executive block grant. There was around 141 million of teaching grant forecast for the year that we're in to support teaching activities and to go alongside the tuition fee paid by students. We also provide funding to local institutions in the form of capital grant, and there's been, over the last 10 years, to over 200 million of that to cover a range of products and buildings. Second area is around research and supporting the higher education institutions to build their capacity and leverage funding from other sources. Again, around 75 million of funding to support R&D is provided every year. That's scored as capital DEL from the executive block grant. And the third element, which I think we'll be focusing on today, is the funding provided by the department to support students, for instance, in the form of maintenance and other targeted grants, as well as the maintenance and tuition fee loans, which we'll be discussing with you today. In 23-24, the department provided financial support to almost 46,000 students. That included the best part of 50 million in grants, which are scored as resource DEL and therefore funded from the block. In terms of loans, though, these are paid annually through the annually managed expenditure budgets, which sit outside of the block grant. And in 24-25, we expect to issue around 220 million in tuition fee loans, 162 million in maintenance loans, so 382 million in total. There's also ring-fence DEL provided by Treasury, which is associated with the subsidy, including the expected losses on those loans. The written briefing we provided sets out some of the complexities underpinning the student loan system, The current repayment terms for local students here are known as Plan 1. They were originally introduced across England, Scotland and Wales as well as here. And in the intervening period, different repayment plans as well as policies in terms of tuition fees and maintenance support have been introduced in the different administrations. All policy changes to loans, it's worth noting, including repayment terms and conditions, require approval from Treasury. The expected loss rate on loans reflected in both the RAB and stock charge is important in decisions in terms of what's affordable. And just finally to note that there are 3 main variables across the different plan types. As you'll have seen, the threshold for salary for starting repayment, the interest rate charged and the loan write-off period. Some of this can be complex. So for instance, the interest rate on Plan 1 can be RPI or Bank of England base rate +1, while the headline interest rate for Plan 2 does actually vary when you drop below a certain income threshold. One broad point of consistency is the 9% collection rate, apart from the postgraduate loan that England and Wales have. So the 9% is pretty consistent. I hope you found the written briefing a helpful introduction, and very much welcome your views and questions.
Thank you, Mark, for that. And as you say, it is a complex picture. So I just want to set the scene for this one. Successive decisions by the executive here to maintain student fees at the level that they have has limited the amount of places available for Northern Ireland students to study at universities in Northern Ireland. So more students are then having to find different places to go and get their higher education, the vast majority of which are choosing to study in other parts of the UK. As a result of that, then they are on a different repayment plan for their student loan that they would be if they were in Northern Ireland.
With the same terms and conditions, so
but the interest rate to which they pay is different?
No, they would still be on the Plan 1 terms. So if you're Northern Ireland domiciled, whether you go to England and pay 9,250 or stay here and pay 4,750, the interest rate, the threshold, those conditions would be the same. If you're from here, you'll be on Plan 1.
Okay, so regardless of where the student studies, they will always pay?
Correct. It's the amount that they will be borrowing might vary because the tuition fee rate is higher, but yeah, the terms and conditions would be the same.
Okay, so there's no difference in terms of where you study then, you're saying, in terms of, apart from the higher figure, which you'll have to pay, your interest rate will not be any different? Between Plan 1 and Plan 2, there's no difference?
There is a difference between Plan 1 and Plan 2, so no Northern Irish domiciles, no one from Northern Ireland would be on Plan 2, they're all on Plan 1. English students between certain years, and I can't quite remember them, will be on Plan 2. Welsh students will be on Plan 2 and are continuing on Plan 2. England are moving to Plan 5
from 2023.
Okay, fair enough. Padraig then?
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thanks for your presentation. So student loan interest rate at the minute, this is just figures from your website, is 4.3%. So how do you set that rate?
So there's a low interest rate guarantee. It's referred to in Plan 1. So it's either RPI or the Bank of England base rate +1.
So it fluctuates?
Yes, it does change, and it has changed, yes.
And how often do you update that figure?
So I need to look to colleagues to remind me on the detail. So RPI, I think, is used yearly.
So it's set to, Johnny's well to correct me here, so it's set at September based on the RPI of the previous March, but then it can fluctuate in year. So it is adjusted all the time on a monthly basis by the student loans company.
So the RPI sets the maximum interest for the year. If the Bank of England base rate plus 1% is below that, so it's in the favour of the student, then the interest rate would drop. And again, and it can also rise if the Bank of England base rate rises, but it won't go beyond the RPI that was set at the start of the year.
Well, you set your maximum rate, it fluctuates month to month.
It can do.
Is it worth us, given the sense of how it's fluctuated in a few recent months?
Yeah, we do have some figures, and since October 2022, it has been on the Bank of England plus 1%. So it has not been at the RPI rate since, keep me right, Siobhan, October 2022. But
August 2022.
Yes. So obviously at the moment it's 4.3%. 3%, but in recent months, it's in 2024, it's fluctuated around 6%, 6.25%, 5.5%, 5%. So there is fluctuation.
Okay. Second point on that is the student loan obviously generates from as soon as you get that loan. So I think a lot of people who have gone to university believe that when they finish, when they get a job over a certain threshold of over a certain amount, that they're getting paid, that then their interest will accrue. But actually your interest accrues from the minute that you take out that loan. Do you think that model's fair?
Well, look, there's a trade-off between different elements here. So there is a kind of an affordability point around student loans. The loss rate that you make on them has to be within a threshold and kind of agreed by Treasury. So I think there's a number of things you could change. The interest rate, when the interest rate kicks in, the threshold on when you start to repay it, the write-off period, which again we're at 25 years here at the minute. So I think it's we would like the best terms and conditions possible for students. It's about trying to pick one of those plans that is set out and saying what do we think is the best and also most affordable for students from Northern Ireland.
Yeah. I mean, I took out a student loan in 2014, and just in advance of this preparation today, I've spoken to a number of my friends who studied around the same time, after, before, so on. And I have no recollection of this ever being communicated, that you would accrue interest from the minute your loan was taken out. So what is the communication strategy?
I think that when students take out a student's loan, I think they're required to sign the terms and conditions, which would set out all of those elements.
Yeah. So that would be on the Student Finance NI website, which obviously that is the customer-facing portal, where I assume all the information will be available there. But I understand what you're saying.
If you're a student at 18 and you're going to university for the first time ever, I do personally feel that there's a financial negligence if you're not prepared to talk a student at 18 through steps of the impact of that, and particularly the fact that interest accrues from the day you take the loan out. I do think that it is negligent to not make that explicitly clear. It might be in the terms and conditions, but like we all know that when you get terms and conditions for most things, how many people read them realistically? So how can you change and update that strategy so that students are actually aware of it?
We'll take that away. We'll go and check what's on the website and how it's communicated to students, and speak to the Education Authority, I think it would be, or possibly the Student Loan Company, and have a look and see whether we can make that clearer, upfront, central, because we don't want anyone to sign up to anything that they've not got a full understanding of. That's in none of our interests. So if we can communicate that better, we will do.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sinead?
Thank you very much. What are the current levers at the department's disposal in relation to tuition fee loans, to being able to vary them and the repayment options, etc., according to the University of Study, and also the area of study? So if it's a particular area that perhaps maybe the economy needs skilled people in this, and we have a deficit, are there levers within the current?
I think that would be difficult to try and vary the loan terms and conditions by site, to be honest. So there are 5 plan types which we've set out in the briefing that are used in different countries. Creating a new plan type with the student loan company requires a lot of work on financial systems. It is very expensive to create new plan types with a different interest rate or different threshold or different requirements there. I think there may be other levers that we might look to first, if you see what I mean. Obviously the tuition fee level is variable, depending on what the institution decides to charge. There are bursaries and other elements that are provided to students. So I would say it's not impossible to look to change the loan terms and conditions to vary it by place. I don't think any other administration has done that, and I think it would be very expensive and complex to do. There might be better levers that we could look to pull.
Okay, and currently, what kind of bursaries are available?
So institutions will offer their own ones. There's a requirements through widening participation to provide bursaries to certain types of individual. I know we also fund, Johnny, keep me right, there's the All Ireland bursaries funded by McManus scholarships.
McManus scholarships, yeah. Sorry, just to clarify, when you talk about bursaries, do you mean maintenance grants or grants as well?
Yeah,
so that's
okay.
That's a bigger area of funding. That's 3,475, I think, per year for the maximum grant, and that's payable to households with incomes up to £19,203, and then it is means tested downwards to £50 at around 41k of income. So we currently pay out just over 40 million a year in terms of that to students.
Yeah, and then particular bursaries as well that.
So I think ones the department's directly involved in would be the ones that we drive for our policy on widening participation, and probably McManus is the only other one that the department's directly involved in. I think there might be maybe the Ashland bursaries this year. I think there was some work around.
There's other targeted support like childcare support, adult learners allowance, and also adult dependence grants and disabled students allowance. So there's another element of funding there as well.
In relation to the higher education review, are you concerned that not including MASN and the distribution of students across university campuses within the review may represent really, I suppose, not a problem, maybe a missed opportunity?
So I think the issue of MASN and the kind of balance across different campuses will be looked at as part of the work on McGee. I think there'll be a lot of work done there. So I think we'll have covered that one fairly well through that process, would be my suggestions. I think with the higher education funding review, the challenge is partly setting the scope, which isn't so large. It's going to take us forever to complete it. I think there's a lot to be done to look at all the student support payments that Johnny was mentioning a minute ago, to look at the financial viability of our universities, to look at the way the allocation formula works in terms of the teaching grant that I talked about and how that's provided. So there'll need to be some interaction with MASN policy as part of that. I don't think it can be completely separated.
Just say that, I mean, no final decisions have been made on the scope of the review. At the moment, we're engaging with all the HEIs, because the Minister's been clear that we need to do this in partnership with the sector and the student unions and the lecturers. So there's no decision. We need to get all the views, condense that and bring proposals to the Minister, and then obviously brief the committee at that point.
And during the summer I had a constituent who contacted me, and he was seeking to study in the European Union, and I had asked the Minister would he amend the regulation or the regulations to allow NI students to apply for tuition fees, to apply for the maintenance grant and loan support, and the response was that he was seeking the advice of the department and getting an update on that. Have you looked into any of that at this stage?
We have done some background work. We've not provided formal advice to the Minister yet, so I mean, it is. Most administrations, from what I can see, don't fund students to go and complete higher education studies as a whole in Europe. Sometimes there's some limited support. So I think in Ireland in the south they provide some maintenance support from others who wish to study elsewhere. But we're still going through and gathering that information around what others do. I think as with all these things, there would be a trade-off if we wanted to provide additional financial support for people who wanted to study elsewhere. We would have to work that within the budgets that we've got. I think the other challenge with people studying in Europe and places is we need to understand what was a bona fide course and how to make the payments, which can be difficult outside of the financial system we've got, etc. So that there would be a number of challenges to look at as part of that.
Okay.
Anna?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it just triggered something in my memory about a constituent who is, I think, doing a medical postgrad degree in England, and that is unable to get financial support. Is that the case? Is that why is that the case? If you've got a student, you know, originally from here who's and this is a top performing student, and is unable to have any support, financial support for her studies?
There's a general principle that we don't fund people for a second undergraduate degree. Now that I think that does become particularly complicated in medicine, where these shortened 4-year postgraduate entry medical courses, technically they still count as an undergraduate degree. So in England and Wales, they will provide funding for people to complete those courses. Scotland, they've got a particular product which I think only applies in Scotland to allow people to access a particular 4-year medical course. The Minister has recently announced his plans to make a change so that people studying a 4-year medical course in Northern Ireland, who are Northern Ireland domiciles or count as home students, would be able to access tuition fee funding. So that would particularly affect those studying graduate entry medicine at the McGee campus of Ulster University. More generally, in terms of the support for people to study a second undergraduate degree, that's something that, again, subject to final views from the Minister on scope, we would expect to look at through the Higher Education Funding Review. Again, there would be some trade-offs there. If we put out more loans for people to do second degrees, that would mean kind of less headroom to look at the maintenance support or other aspects of the financial system. So we're keen to look at as much of it together as we can.
What I'm hearing many times from industry is really that employers are now looking for a second degree to be able to get the specialist educated employees. That is an added burden if you're going to have to then do another degree to really give you that competitive advantage. Just wanted to ask one other thing with regard to recouping student loans. If a student then relocates and works abroad, works abroad, do they continue to pay that? How is that also referenced in the terms and conditions?
I'm pretty sure it would be referenced in the terms and conditions. So yes, what can't be done is an automatic kind of taking off their income through the tax system, as done if you're located in the UK. But the student loan company would seek a repayment from them, and I think there's a set rate that they use for people who are living internationally.
Okay. Just on the back of what Padraig was saying, then I went on to the website to see what type of information was on it, and I kind of think, as somebody who's continually onto the credit union for loans, the loan calculator is a really good thing. So if you're considering doing something or updating the website, more information, I would suggest you look at something along the lines of that as well, because you can put in different scenarios and get different results.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. We'll look at that. Yeah.
Not related to this, but are you the officials looking after the review of higher education funding at the minute?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Whereabouts are we with that?
So as I said, Chair, previously, the Minister has given agreement that we should progress with a review. At the highest level, it will be around there'll be 3 strands. There'll be one strand looking at the financial sustainability of the sector. Here, the second strand will look at the block grant model, the model which distributes the funding to the institutions, to our 5 local institutions, and then the third.
That's done through the teaching grant.
Yes.
And the research grant, or just the teaching grant.
Research will probably be out of scope, again subject to final decisions from the Minister.
Is it just the teaching grant?
So that would be the teaching, what we call teaching block grant, and then the third element obviously is the student support, which is what a lot of what we've been talking about this morning. Now, where we have got to, as the Minister's asked us to do this in partnership, so we have 3 draft terms of reference, which for each of the streams, work streams, so probably 3 streams, which can probably, well, certainly the student support element can work in parallel to the other 2, so one is not dependent potentially on the other. We're meeting, and those meetings are going on into the new year with all the higher HEIs, and at which point we will come to hopefully an agreed position across the sector, and then we will put that final draft terms of reference to the Minister. for his.
What's the current figure for the teaching block grant?
140 million, 144 million off the top of my head.
140 million. And the Minister has not bid in his budget to increase that, or he has?
Well, there was the bid for Magee, and so the extra teaching places in Magee, the 890 odd places over 3 years at Magee. But no, I'm not aware of any.
So the concern, particularly by Queen's University, is that the pie for this teaching grant is not getting any bigger. But the Minister, given his particular view in relation to Magee, wants to re-slice that pie, and that will be at the detriment to Queen's University. You may have seen the quite robust commentary, both privately and publicly, made by Queen's in relation to this issue. Queen's University is the leader of higher education provider across Northern Ireland, and I, as chairman of this committee and as a representative of Belfast, will take particular issue if there is any attempt to undermine the role that Queen's University plays in the economy of Northern Ireland. Ulster University also has a vital role to play in our economy. I have Ulster University North Belfast campus. Coleraine, my colleague Morris Bradley, will never forgive me if I don't give them a name plug, because they play a vital role also. And this committee has been very clear for our support for the expansion of Magee. But what we do not want to see is that done to the detriment of Queen's University.
And the Minister has been very clear with us when we've met that it must not be to the detriment of any of the other institutions and Queen's, and also when we've met with Queen's on the review of higher education funding, and they have made those views abundantly clear to Mark and myself. So.
And you then previously in your contribution said that you will seek the agreement of the institution. So if there isn't agreement from Queen's University on this, then you will not proceed?
We would certainly reflect their views to the Minister. We would hope we will work to ensure we've got terms of reference that all institutions are happy with. Queen's, Ulster, Open University, Stranmillis and St Mary's as well. And the student voice will be really important from in USI as well. So we're confident we can get there. If there's anything we feel like we can't address, then the final decision, I guess, will be the Minister's.
Any member want to raise anything on that? President? No? Okay. Colleagues, thank you very much indeed for that, and I wish you all a enjoyable festive period. Okay, nothing. I don't think we need to follow. Do we need to follow?
I think, Chairperson, we're writing to the department just seeking the information on the fluctuation of the loan rate for the last few years, and then we're also, I think, asking about the communications with students in terms of terms and conditions, and encouraging the department to make it clearer, including the addition of the student loan calculator. And speaking of student loan calculators, I went online and found one, and I put in different numbers to see how it came out, and that's where question 2 comes from. That if you compare Plan 1 with Plan 2, what happens is, so Northern Ireland students, Plan 1, English students, Plan 2. The English students pay more, they pay longer, but the upfront payments are lower. So that might be, if you take account of inflation, etc., that might be a better deal. And what the Minister has indicated, sorry for making go on so long, but the Minister has indicated it would be super expensive to devise our own magic bespoke version. But I would have thought, and whether the committee wants to explore whether the department could say, could we offer Plan 2 to Northern Ireland students who have particularly large loans, because that would reduce their payments now, and their payments, okay, would go on longer, but that would actually possibly turn out cheaper. There would be more debt write-off, but that's fine because the UK government will cover that. So I don't know whether members want to ask the department just about that, to comment on it.
Just on that part, I don't like that type of language, to be honest with you, that just the UK government will cover it. I just think we need to be very mindful that it's all public money.
Indeed, sorry, just to clarify, I know where the member's coming from, yeah, we've heard this before, but you'll note it appears every month we get this update from the department on what they've spent, and there's this underspend of millions, tens of millions, and what it is, it's a debt write-off, which we don't use because we're using Plan 1, because we get more out of the students sooner. we're actually more likely to pay off their debts, whereas our fellow citizens in the rest of the UK, they're paying less but for longer, and the debt write-off is larger, and there's a facility there which we're not using, and so it wouldn't be a bespoke solution. It would be, if there's such a thing was doable, we'd be bringing ourselves into line with the rest of the UK.
That's a better way to phrase it.
Just in general, I'm just very public on those comments.
I think we have to look at all options, but I actually think it would be more prudent in the first instance to firstly bring in NUS and also to bring in the student loans company directly. Because I think that if we're having this conversation, we need to firstly understand the student experience and how Plan 1 versus Plan 2 would benefit people who are in that sphere and therefore their representatives through NUS. But I also think that to do that, we should bring in the student loans company directly, because the department can only answer so much of this. They can only answer insofar as this is what the payment to students is. They can't really answer in terms of how the repayments is. For instance, I know a lot of people have contacted our office about issues with repayments. For instance, if they're changing jobs, move jobs, out of a job, how do that work? That falls to the student loan company. So in the first instance, if we're going to action something coming out of this, I would actually suggest that we bring in NUS and the student loans company in directly before we do anything else. I think that would be a more strategic option.
Not initially opposed to that, Padraig, and obviously we're at the agreement of the committee, but we do have quite a busy forward work plan at this stage, and I would just be keen to seek clarification from the Minister in relation to his other legislative, because there was quite a substantial change to the legislative programme that was just announced earlier. So I don't want to commit ourselves to going down this rabbit hole just yet in case we have to do the legislative, and not a very important one. It also gives me an opportunity to plug the APG on student or on further and higher education, which we still have some vacancies in the office bearers of, which might be something that we could have a look at some of this stuff on as well.
Just to come back to that, Phil, I think, even in the interim, could we not ask for a submission, either written or an informal meeting? I just think that to do this without that piece, I don't think we'd be getting the full picture.
Let's try and get a written submission, and then we can get that done, and then we could even do an informal session with them if members are content.
NUS and student loan company?
Yes.
Is that agreed, Chairperson?
Yep. Agreed. Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Back to correspondence then. Yes. Item 8. Okay. 228 members of your pack. Item 2, members are asked to note a departmental response to committee queries on technology sector action plans, including information on the Cluster Accelerator programme and a further clustering policy. The Council Regional Profile detail is available on the department's website. Members content to note? Yeah. Thank you. Item 3, members are asked to note a departmental response to committee queries on how the skills strategy will support the sectoral action plans. Members content to note?
Yeah.
Thank you. Members are then asked to consider a departmental response on disability support service, including the RSM report of 2018, the ETI report on the Training and for Success programme. It appears the department has not provided the key performance indicators. Are we content to write to the department to seek those, members? Thank you. Item 5 at 6:04, members are asked to note a departmental response to the draft tourism and draft 10-year tourism action plan, including some detail on peace tourism, the terms of reference, visit diary, outcome, OBC, destination stewardship, social media spending, and a review of the certification of alternative accommodation. Members wish to note the high tourism spend in Causeway Coast and Glens and the relevant spend per visit in that council area. At page 6, 10 and 11, there was a number of issues that were raised by committee members. Are there any that they want to raise at this stage on those responses?
Just on the, there's a couple of big issues in there in terms of the Peace Tourism Group.
Yes.
There's, in terms of the membership, obviously one of the things there, it says next steps is the formal creation of the working group, which will meet in early 2025. We've no clarity in terms of who those members are. We do know who attended the initiation workshop, which was, well, potentially 5 people. That was certainly 5 organisations, but who, I suppose it's just to get clarity, if it's been set up in early 2025, who has agreed to go on to that? Because I think that's vitally important. The other point that I was going to raise just was in relation to point 2, which is an update in the Visit Dairy outline business case. again, that's another significant piece of work. I note that the council have indicated that they don't have the finance to continue funding the agreement with Visit Derry. What I would like to find out, I suppose, in that is obviously we need to be kept updated in terms of the review of that. There have been some people who haven't been satisfied in recent times in relation to the performance, etc. A lot of good people in there, don't get me wrong, but I think that there's maybe a gap, and I suppose just to keep an eye on that, because ultimately they're asking for the department to cover that funding as well. So it's a significant amount of money.
So yes, indeed. You want us, so in relation to the first instance, yes, I've also followed the issue up in relation to the peace tourism stuff just in a private capacity, and we've been given the members who attended the August workshop, but we haven't been told who will be on the formal working group, so I think that would be useful to find out.
Right to the department in those terms then?
Yes, and then, sorry, the second one was on
the Visit Derry OBC.
Okay, so it's still being developed, is that correct?
I think that's...
I suppose if we could get an update
Yep.
in the new year on what that review is as well.
All right for that.
In relation to the tourism piece as well, and the peace tourism, the chief executive indicated at a Derry event the other 2 weeks ago, when that evening that he was at the committee. They talked about the museums, etc., and he talked at length about the museum that was delivering the John Hume story. It's not a museum that is delivering the John Hume story, and I think that for the Chief Executive of Tourism NI to be saying that loudly when he is at events promoting tourism and promoting the city and the region, it's just wrong. It's technically wrong, and he shouldn't be doing that. And I think as a committee we should, indicate that that's not the John Hume legacy story.
Members content?
Yep. Well, just Chair, just a point on that. I mean, obviously, I totally appreciate Sinead's comments as well, but and the comments of others. But I think it tells the story of many people within that area, and John Hume obviously is one of them. So I think it's an element, but totally appreciate what you're saying. It's not in the entirety.
If it doesn't have the consent of the family.
I mean, I'm just wondering, Chair. I mean, I've no issue with anything Sinead said, other than the fact he didn't say it at this committee. I'm not sure it's the if Sinead or an individual MLA maybe wants to raise that with him, fair enough. I mean, none of the rest of us didn't hear the comments, so I didn't hear what he said. So I don't want to be writing to somebody to say don't say something that I didn't hear who said it. If he said it here, that's a different matter. I think that's probably a matter for an individual MLA to pick up rather than the committee.
It was through notes. It was a written speech. It was through notes, and the mayor of Derry and Strabane were given the same notes as well. So it was given the same notes, and obviously she left it out. But this has come from the chief executive of Tourism.
No, and I'm not saying it's not a legitimate issue. I'm just saying I'm not sure it's a legitimate issue for the committee in the circumstances where it was raised.
So we are due to have him back when the tourism vision is further developed, and hopefully we can then raise those and other issues with him then, if you're content at that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for now, we just record it.
We'll record it in the minutes. So.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Item 6 then, members are asked to note confirmation of executive approval for a ban on all forms of onshore petroleum exploration. Are members content to note? Members are now asked to note correspondence from the Windsor Framework Committee on EU regulations on the GPS, which comes into effect on the 13th of December. Is the committee content that we write to the department seeking comment on this?
Sure. Thanks, and obviously sit on that committee.
Yes.
But just we're very keen for us to establish. We didn't get time to go into it fully with the minister, but just to establish what the impact of this is on Northern Ireland consumers.
Yep.
And that might require us also perhaps reaching out to the Consumer Council, given that a lot of these responsibilities and these new rules impact upon the daily life of our consumers and the economy in general.
Members content?
Yep.
Thank you. Item 8 then, members are asked to note a copy of correspondence from the Department for Communities to DFE. Members content to note?
Item 9, members are asked to consider information on the South East HEFE Industry Cross-Border Alliance involving Work Plus, a Peace Plus project designed to support cross-border clustering and educational pathways at level 4. Are members content that we try and seek a further briefing on this in the new year?
Is that agreed, members?
Yeah.
Okay. Item 10, members are asked to note information regarding the Peace Plus Changemakers Fund, which will open for applications in January 25. We contend to note. Members are asked to consider a response from SSE to the draft PFG. Members content to note at this stage. Okay. Item 12, then, members are asked to note a response from the Peace Summit to the draft PFG. Members content to note. Thank you. Again, members for noting that item 13 is correspondence from the RHA and the department. Content to note. Item 14, members are asked to note an invitation to the chairperson to attend the formal launch of the final McGee Expansion Task Force. Is the committee content that I attend, diary permitting?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, Chairperson, we also have tabled correspondence from Ms McLaughlin.
Yes, so table correspondence, members, there is a letter from Sinead McLaughlin. Dear Peter, I would like to make a formal request that the organisation Free the Night is given the opportunity to present to the Economy Committee. Free the Night has been working on several projects around safety and licensing and just founded the After Dark Alliance, which includes Night Stars advisors, research advocates from all over the United Kingdom and Ireland. Are members content that we seek engagement with the organisation?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Other tabled items then
we'll put those back in again.
Okay, next item then is forward work plan, which is item 9. Yeah. We've done item 9, 10.
Yeah, that's the year-end correspondence, which through the pages.
Okay.
Agenda item 9.
Okay. Next. Last line forward work plan.
So, members, in terms of our forward work programme, look, I'm sorry about this. We're back on the 8th of January, earlier than anybody else, to talk about the McGee Expansion Task Force report, and also to hear from UU. The department contacted me, I think the day before yesterday, and said that the Great British Energy Bill, which is going through Westminster, I think the Minister had some difficulties with that, but those have now been resolved. So legislative consent is going to be sought at the end of January, and it can't be any later. So what the committee will have to do is produce a report. But in order to do that, we haven't got any evidence on it, so we're going to have to hear from the department. And in order for me to hear from the department, write a report, get you to approve it, so that it's published in time for a debate, which will probably be about the 27th of January, we're going to have to extend our meeting on the 8th of January to include the department telling us about the Great British Energy Bill. I don't think it'll take them very long to do it. But so the plan would be, we start at 10:30 with the McGee Expansion Task Force, go on maybe at 11:45, maybe a bit later, maybe about 12 to the Ulster University, talking about from the Vice Chancellor, Strategic Policy Unit and all that good stuff. Then we'll break for lunch, come back at 1:32, hear from the department for not very long, and then maybe we'll toddle off to City of Derry Airport after that. So that is, you don't have any other committees to go to, because everybody else is wisely meeting the following week. But it's just, this is the only way to make this work. So because the Assembly will be considering a legislative consent motion, the only people who are going to know anything about it other than the Minister are yourselves, so I'd like you to be briefed. So sorry about that, it's the only way I can make it work. Hope that's okay.
Yep. The delay is obviously not a result of anything that this committee has done. It's between
Westminster
and the executive. Yes. So listen, we will be flexible on the issue. Officials will obviously have to travel at that stage to be able to do that.
Just to check on that as well, obviously the department are going to issue papers in advance of that, are they? So
the papers are going to the executive on the 19th of December.
Okay.
So otherwise, if I had the papers, I'd asked them for this meeting, but they said no. So they'll be at the executive on the 19th. They'll get them to me. I'll issue a meeting pack to you on the Friday, is that the 3rd of January? So I will issue that to you. We then meet on the 8th and can talk about all this good stuff.
It was just, and I appreciate, like, if it doesn't work with your time, it's 100%, because I appreciate with holidays and different stuff. I'm just thinking, if we could get that in advance of breaking for Christmas, it might just work better, because I'm just conscious that, you know, with holidays, if we're getting the pack on the 3rd and potentially people off and whatever, until the Wednesday, we mightn't get the fully.
In terms of the briefing on the Great British Energy bill, I will share that with members immediately if you want, as soon as I get it. But just in terms of the other things, what tends to happen is there's a ton of correspondence, which usually materialises the day after New Year's Day. So I kind of like to put all that in when I have it.
Oh, that's fair enough. It was just stuff at work. It's no problem. Thank you.
Again, I don't mean to spook members, or indeed to tell them not to scrutinise, not saying that at all, but I'm not sure that you'll find the Great British Energy Bill to be controversial. But you might, but I'm not. I don't know that you will.
We're known for such things, Peter.
Well, there you go.
John's got a reputation to keep.
You said we're starting at 10:30.
Yes.
We want to start at 10 or?
Well, it's just for you all to get there. I'm sure some members.
We can get here for 10, so I'm
assuming.
Good point.
Other people could get the other way for 10.
But can you confirm there will be remote access?
No, there will not be remote access.
We need to invest in the gate to get that.
That's good.
I think, Chair, if we can do the 10 a.m. and then it gives you half an hour, because we know what these things are like.
Start at 9. You can get it.
10 o'clock it is.
Okay.
Okay, and just to remind members that there's an informal meeting tomorrow, which a couple of members have gamely agreed to go to, where we're meeting with the US Chamber of Commerce. And Philip will, I think, say a few opening words when we get there.
Thank you. No, I have a Christmas engagement that I had agreed to a long time ago to support the local economy in Belfast City Centre.
We're doing that last week, isn't it?
I do that every week.
You're being accused of being full of prep.
Exactly. That'll be a bad label to get. Any other business?
Sorry, members, just a quick procedural one. Again, not a big deal, just so that you all understand. The chairperson can can suspend proceedings anytime he wants. He does not require your permission. What is required is if the committee is going to go into closed session, then he does require your agreement. So it was just something that was said last week, and there was some confusion about what happened in another committee. So the chairperson can just suspend any time, just like that. It doesn't need your agreement. Closed session, different matter. Even if it's on the agenda, he has to seek the agreement of the committee.
I will always seek your agreement before I say unless you say no, and then I'm not. Okay, we will then formally close the meeting, and we will then reopen on Wednesday, the 8th of January at 10 a.m. Up at McGee. Are members content that the committee adjourn, and then we move into closed session?
Sorry, no, we're not adjourning, so we're just going into closed session, if that's okay.
Are we happy to move into closed session?
Is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Committee Room 30, sound.